259 of TCP. Welcome to another week. Nearly 260 now. Look at us go. One more to go. And we're nearly at the Summer Showdown tournament. Toronto is upon us. Can't wait to see both of you guys there because I know you both are definitely going, right? That's a joke because I'm not going because I'm going to be casting APAC, so I'll be looking at everyone from afar with great envious eyes. Like, damn it, let me into an event. Bring me to an event. Joe?
Hell no. Definitely not.
Even though it's like, I don't know.
It's a hot
couple
it's a stone's throw away.
For you.
Yeah, it is.
You live so far north, like you could just swim over the border and you'd be there.
Yeah, I think just gonna wait for finals. I think it'd be more interesting for me to go to finals. I do eventually want to go to a homestand. I think it would be like a nice bucket list cross off, but I don't know. Not really. Not in the cards.
You going to finals, Yiska?
Maybe to finals. We unfortunately from Europe to Toronto didn't make much sense this year.
Right. So we'll do a live TCB episode at the finals then, if we're all there.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
One of these days need to.
My goodness. All right, we haven't talked about games in a wee while. There's just been so many roster moves. There's just been so many. You know, we had our own little roster mania happening in the past couple of weeks. You know, like some unprecedented roster moves, and the roster moves have stopped in terms of players moving, but the staff movements have been ongoing. We've had continued staff movements over the past week. Maybe a little bit of drama out of the Boston camp. We'll explore that and maybe see if there's anything there. Maybe it's not really any drama at all, but they probably made the most moves. We'll be talking about what's going on with some of the teams on their pathways to the Summer Showdown, because it's been a wild stage so far. We now have 6 locked-in teams, 4 from NA, 2 from APAC. And a lot of open spaces still. You know, half of the positions on both of the regions are still open. So there's a lot of teams that can still make it in. And even for teams like the 1 in 4 Gladiators, still plenty of pathways in, apparently. So there's a lot of different ways that they can make it despite their current results. So just kind of the way it works out. And this is with a 6-game stage qualifier as well. We used to have 4 match stages last year, remember? And we had way more tiebreakers going on there. Now seems like we should have way less tiebreakers, but yeah,
not necessarily the case. It is nice. It's weird that you mentioned that because I hadn't thought about last year and like the format, like how like I know it's a meme like every season. It's like, oh well, every map matters, every match, you know, gotta big it up, it's super important. But like last year, with only 4 qualifying matches for the LAN, like it was like you did not have a ton of room to fuck around. And it feels like now, with Gladiators as a good example, you have some room to grow into the meta and like find yourself. And it's like Gladiators are like right on the cusp, like they're kind of a mid team, like breaking through a little bit, and we'll get more into them a little bit later. But it's like this is a good example of why like finding a good sweet spot is super important. I think we may still see the Gladiators in Toronto.
The 0-4 Paris Eternal, theoretically speaking, this is important. Theoretically speaking, they can get a 2-4 finish just like the Gladiators, but Paris are mathematically knocked out, whereas Gladiators are alive.
Yeah, because of map score, right? Is that a difference?
Yeah, that's a humongous map score difference. But like, that's why teams like the 0-4 Valiant are technically not out. You know, they're not mathematically out. It's kind of crazy that the way the scores are, the pathway is still open for them. They only need to beat Shanghai and Chengdu, guys, but who the hell knows?
It's a little difficult, but you know,
maybe a little hard.
Who knows? You gotta tune in, gotta show up.
Right.
Gotta see what happens.
The last thing to talk about before we get in is I don't know, there's anything on screen here that I can see. Is there anything weird about I'm just looking at our camera feeds. Oh yeah, Yiska has a camera again.
Yeah, true.
True. Yeah.
Based.
There it goes. There it is. There it is.
He's
But
alive.
you were standing so still that he thought it might have been a still image because you didn't even blink for like a good 10
The
seconds
thing
straight.
is, like, my eyes so dry, I kind of wanted to do eye drips in, but I thought
Yeah.
it would be
No.
weird on camera, so I didn't. So now,
Well, now you have to do it because it's
Okay.
like you've already addressed it.
oh my god, dude.
And then I'll commentary. Okay, so for audio listeners, it looks like he's putting in a contact. His head isn't necessarily as far back as I'd like. I feel like maybe there's a little bit of runoff here. I think the maximal efficiency could be a little bit better, but Avra, what do you think about this?
And to the visual viewers, for the people actually watching,
This is the
I
singular
apologize.
tear
My apologies.
shed for
You
Gladiators.
didn't need to see that, and now you have, which can't take that back.
Oh, allergies are terrible at this moment, dude.
Bro, mine were so bad. I feel
There's one team I want to talk about right off the cuff though.
Okay.
Before we get there, guys, 259 brought to you by Outlaw Vista Bebe, Battlecry, Refine Bean, Bronzebot Bruhal, Picasso, Chris R34444, Cash 67, Lolshin, Porkchop Sammy, Rex Zane, Volamel Smooth Nuts, YouTube members Isam Jello, William Jesse, Vishman, via Element 6, AK, and Chris R. And that team is, we didn't even write this on the docket, but I think it's important. The San Francisco Shock have officially now breached the Overwatch League record for most consecutive regular season match wins at 20. And they haven't even done it. They're not even finished. They can still keep going. It's an active record. And they play against the Dallas Fuel next. So look, Dallas could end their run. But this is now kind of the Titanic matchup for them because both Dallas and San Francisco Shock are undefeated this stage, both 5-0. And both look like the best teams in North America in this particular meta. And Shock, if they win this and go 21, we go to Countdown Cup. Entirely fresh schedule for them. And their first games are Washington, Houston, Toronto, Atlanta, and then they'll finish off with Paris, London. Like, is it crazy to think that if they beat Dallas next week, that they could finish the entire year flawlessly, no losses in the regular season?
I mean,
there is some low-hanging fruit, right? With like unprecedented achievements with a 0 in one of the wins and or loss column, right? I feel like we've all been burned a little bit before, harkening back to like season 1 where we're all like, no, Shanghai, there's no way they go winless, right? 40 some odd games, there's no way. But the more you kind of look at Shock, the more you look at like how stratified specifically NA kind of feels like it is. Granted, certain metas shake things up a little bit. We've seen that with Junker Queen and whatnot. I think there is a real possibility that Shock, funnily enough, the org that has a title defense, I think the only title defense if memory serves, I think it's growing increasingly more likely that the Shock finish this regular season undefeated.
I mean, yeah, by the very definition of statistics, that's true. Very well done, Joe. Thank you. The less games they have to lose or like have left to win, the more likely it's getting that they go to.
Yeah, I'm learning. You're slowly penetrating. The noggin. I feel like you should be proud of me. I feel like this is a growth moment, right?
Now here's the second lesson. You know how I told you in long hours in Discord how metas are gamble and every team cashes in their like win thingies, and you and Kenobi were like, no, the Justice are prepared for 0 metas. You don't understand.
Okay, no, I feel like there's much better ways to explain that away, and I don't think that just
I agree
randomly...
there are much better ways, but they're not as self-serving.
I mean, you're not wrong. That's very true. That is very true.
The whole flexibility talk, they started the season on a minimum roster in terms of quantity of players. Like you must field 6 members, or you have to have 6 people signed. And in the case of some teams, that sixth person is not a player, but we'll maybe get to that later.
Right.
The Shock had 6 players. They added only 1 extra player in Mikey, and still they have so many of these quote unquote meta tickets to
Wait,
cash
is that
in.
right?
Is what right?
Is that the amount of players, right?
7, yeah.
Yeah.
They only have 7. They only have 1 more than the league minimum.
Yeah.
And yet, they are so flexible. They have such high peaks as well. It is wild. It is, and this is a team that has no main support.
True.
And I think the year has gone long enough, and Violet's played enough Lucio now that I guess now that he literally is a main support.
Yeah.
But if you view it from a preseason perspective, you're like, oh, hold on a minute, this team doesn't have a Lucio player. Well, they do, but it's a bit of a meme. Whereas now it's not really a meme anymore. He's kind of legit.
Yeah.
They don't have any more big ticket games left because Shock have already played Glads twice. It's a double round robin in A, by the way, which I say double round robin. They don't play it like an actual double round robin in the what I would say is a chronological sense where you complete an entire round robin before moving on to the next one. Some teams in the first half of the year get 2 matches to get both their matches versus a single team in the first half of the year, whereas realistically it should be spread out between the 2 halves of the year. Either way, I digress. That commentary aside, they don't have any gigantic teams in the way in the last stage. Could Toronto or Atlanta do something? Maybe, but Atlanta don't have the greatest regular season performances. I think San Francisco confidently clears every team on the list for Countdown Cup. I mean, even a team like Houston is just a complete dice roll. You never really know sometimes what level of Houston you get.
I mean,
the Houstonable meme starts from somewhere. That's not just a dig at the team. It's several matches that we've seen. It's just pretty true. It's wow, it really is Houstonable. They just do lose sometimes randomly.
Well, yes.
We still don't.
I think what's also random is whatever meta we're getting in stage 4, and that's the reason why I'm reserved in saying whatever is coming next. And yeah, I mean it could just be the same because they're under nerfing Junker Queen, for instance. That's possible. They try to get rid of golds several times and it never worked.
True.
But
the only metas that would be bad for Shock are ones where Proper isn't on a carry hero,
which is tough to come by. It feels like it is not easy.
Shock have survived 3 metas so far with this roster. I don't see, and right now the current meta is the most turbulent of the metas that we've had.
If you underpower DPS and make it a Rhine meta, they're not going to win this. Lossless.
I'm not mad at that. I do think there is a tank lever. If you really had to design the meta, maybe it's the tank.
Final match of the season, London just beats them. This is a Rhine meta.
That would
and Backbone just maze them out of the server. That would be the only meta. That would be it.
Yeah.
But the Rhine comp would have to be so overwhelmingly strong that it's basically the new Goats or the new Junker Queen comp. It would have to be at that level of broken.
Yeah.
To not allow players to play a Genji or a Tracer or any other flex DPS carry that Proper would normally be on.
Yeah.
That would be a pretty sad way, a really awkward way to end the regular season when you're 27-0 and then in game number 28 you just lose to London because it's a Rhine meta. Unlucky.
Yeah. I mean it's also just
23 out of 24. My bad. Anyway,
we evaluate the rest of their schedule based on how we think the power levels work. For instance, if you got Toronto in stage 2, you think about Toronto differently than Toronto in this stage, right?
Yeah.
So I think we will have to, right now you're thinking, okay, this is all very winnable. If you're getting I don't know, maybe there's a Doom meta back, something like this, Houston then suddenly becomes a little bit more challenging. These types of things, they can't let their foot slip of the pedal. They gotta keep going because whatever meta change is coming up, I don't think they will slip this for the rest of this stage. I think they're honestly probably also the favorites to win the tournament in Toronto. But stage 4, everything can happen. It's an entirely new book, depending on what game balance offers to us.
Right now, I mean, the question will be, I mean, that's all good and well, but that would require them to beat Dallas and prove that they are the best team in this meta. Because I think if Shock goes 6-0 here, I agree. I think I favor them to win the whole tournament.
Yeah.
Because the other teams just don't feel like they are on the level of being able to keep up. Just kind of how it is to me. It's
so unlucky that we didn't have this meta for mid-season, right? Like, I tweeted, like I would have loved to see Shanghai and Seoul against Fuel and Shock. I think that would have likely produced a better outcome than last meta, right? I feel like APAC looks... I'm not convinced that Shock is really stronger than either of those two APAC giants.
I think last meta was a better meta for the game. Without diving back into a very long-winded meta discussion again, I've already put my thoughts out there in terms of why.
Strictly speaking,
So
for the NA versus EU, NA versus APAC narrative, I think it might have been better.
Maybe a close... I don't know, like, yes and no, because I would have said, even for the last meta, that Seoul looked amazing, but then they just didn't show up at the actual tournament. At least I don't think they showed up versus the Rain. Like, they were very... I don't know. That was a very close game. I don't have to go back into that game again. Like, there's been enough said about that particular match. But there's definitely a bit of a revisionism about people saying that Seoul just got owned, right? When you just have to look at the Liquipedia result, and you can know that's completely false. Just watch the game, and you can see that it was a really close game.
Yeah.
But I don't know, because there's the equal theory to be had. It's like, well, even if we played this as the mid-season madness, what's the chance that Seoul just randomly lose to X, Y, or Z? Surely Seoul don't then lose to Hangzhou, because Hangzhou don't look comfortable in this meta compared to Seoul. So they got that going for them. But at the same time, I enjoy the fact that last meta in mid-season we had more competitive teams. Like Hangzhou looked amazing. They were heavily competing versus what they're doing now. We'll get to the APAC discussion in a wee bit. But I mean, yeah, heading back to San Francisco Shock a little bit, just to finish off this topic. What an achievement, though. 20 wins, of which, how many is it this year? It is 17 this year alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
3 from last season, 17 this season. Brand new record achieved. Better than the Runaway Titans. Their current season standings is 51-11 for maps one as well. It's a plus 40. It's the most ridiculous map win percentage. Even it's much better than Soul's, because Soul's lost games. Yeah. Soul's 13-3 with a plus 29, and San Francisco is plus 40. There's a couple things there to notice. One is that the loss record isn't too different. Shock have lost 11 maps. Seoul have lost 13 maps. But the win record is quite a bit different. 51 wins to 42 map wins. So Shock are generally dominating more of their games, which, I don't know, there's a couple ways to read into that. Seoul have definitely had closer calls. Maybe some of the competition is closer in terms of how far away... Like, how far away is the 7th best team to the 1st best team in some cases, right? Whereas, like, in NA, it's, like, really, really far away. The best versus the worst. And then you have Glads at 18 points, so they're 3 points behind Shock, and Glads have won 2 tournaments. They have a lot of bonus points from winning 2 tournaments. Shock have still 3 points ahead of them, because their regular season standings, they have 6 extra match wins. 17-0 versus 11-6. And with an 11-6 record, Glides is still number 2, just because the 2 tournament wins give them so many bonus points. So they are one of those teams that, like, has really done well through tournament wins, but has definitely struggled a lot more in the regular season. So yeah, what are your takes on the Shock regular season so far, or just the season generally speaking? Is it kind of crazy that they're 17-0 in regular seasons but haven't won a tournament yet?
I mean, I think we kind of brought this up going into mid-season, that, like, maybe there was a possibility that, like, the rookie status, I think it's hard to also keep in context the idea that Shock also has like a very like out of the Overwatch League, they have like a disproportional amount of rookies. So like, does that affect your LAN performances? Is that a way that you can kind of explain away like the differentiation between, you know, the regular season dominance where they go 20-0 or they're 17-0 this season? They have this crazy map differential, but for whatever reason, it's hard to get it done. We didn't see that when it came to midseason. I feel like that narrative's kind of dead in the water. The one thing I will say is that we talk about, and I think Yiska definitely has brought this up a number of times about, you know, franchise relations with players, you know, the how they look on paper, you know, what kind of a feeling. I'm running for a lack of a word. There's a word that I'm looking for, but like this idea that like franchises now have like an air about them. They're kind of establishing like who they are in the hierarchy of the rest of the league. And when you have like the golden stage where like Shock didn't drop a map, you have 2 titles to your name, you go on this 20-0 record setting run. It's difficult to see or to think of any other team that can kind of top them in terms of like the face that they must have with like incoming rookies or players that may want to like move teams, like the clout, to use a really shitty influencer word, that San Francisco has right now is insane. Like, it's nuts that like this is the team that you think of all the records set, all the crazy matches, all the most, you know, dominating performances. It's usually the Shock across the board outside of maybe season 1. And even then, like, there was still like hope to be had with some of like the groundwork laid by Sephi. Funnily enough, I don't think gets a lot of respect for that, but again, kind of set Shock up for success in a number of ways. And kind of doing so with speedily now. With
I'm gonna credit Harsha. It was all Harsha to me.
Okay, I mean, that's
I had no idea.
Tangentially related. Somebody else who I don't think gets a lot of credit, but also still did incredible work. But yeah, Shock is an enigma of a team, and I think is you know, setting up an era for themselves if they weren't already in one. If you didn't believe that this, you know, we were in the San Francisco Shock era, I don't think you set these kind of records. I don't think you have these golden stages. They are like, it's a meme that like they're the Golden Gate team, but like they are kind of the Golden Gate keepers, right? Like, you don't get the stage, you don't get the season. You know, they could end this season however many and right? Like actually undefeated in the regular season. That's nuts. That's nuts to even like postulate on, to think about. Like, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Just like how it was with Shanghai. But yeah, it's crazy. Like, hats off to them. They're doing insane work.
Really quickly, I would also add, like, just the comparison between the regular season games and tournaments. Shock ended up losing to Dallas Fuel in terms of being eliminated. We can talk about the Atlanta loss as well. That's maybe a little bit more out there. But they ended up losing to the Dallas Fuel, who it was their home event, first and foremost. Secondly, Dallas looked amazing in that meta until they got to the final versus Glads. Or actually, until they faced Glads, just generally speaking. And maybe we could chalk it up to like, okay, first tournament showing for San Francisco Shock, the new roster, plenty of rookies, like you sort of mentioned. Midseason Madness, I felt like, was way more of Shock's tournament to potentially win, given how well they played, generally speaking. Yeah, it just came down to the final, which was a little bit awkward. I mean, without getting into major details about the final again, it's not a long discussion, but it's like, you know, we can go back to stuff like question mark, couple map choices. They didn't win a map they were supposed to win in Eichenwalde with one of their signature strats. And Glads kind of came out on top when it really mattered. So like, this team wasn't invincible in tournaments, but in the regular season, when they do have to play everybody, and they have to play everybody twice, so far they've beaten everybody. And I think once they beat Dallas again, they don't have any major games left in the way that could really pose a humongous threat to them. You talk about consistency, Joe, and it's like, what is the consistent factor? Is it Crusty? Do we talk about Crusty? Is he the guy? Like, as far as Shock's dominance, right, from the 2019 season forward. 2021 rather was a bit rough, but like 2019, 2020, now 2022, Crusty's been there for all 4 years, all 3 of the good years.
I think you kind of have to, right? I think you have to look at like who has been consistent throughout, like who. And if I had to put my finger on it, and I know this is kind of like a little low hanging fruit, but hopefully this makes sense. I think in the seasons, this is getting into a lot, but hopefully I can make this succinct. I think there is something to attribute to Overwatch League teams that do shuffle enough to identify, like throughout the season, you have to identify the problems and you kind of have to bring in solutions, whether that's like fresh blood or, you know, talented rookies that like you can kind of fit within the system. I feel like when Crusty has been a little lax at that, that's when Shock looks a little rough. So I think the consistent factor here being Crusty, he knows how to work with like some of his like proteges. I'm kind of looking specifically at like a person like Violet. And outside of that, yeah, I don't think the personnel matters. I think he has a great eye for talent. I think he knows how to build out his staff the way he wants it to. And I really think he's carving out a space for himself on like the Mount Rushmore of Overwatch as like the coach, the guy, the Belichick, the whoever. I can't name you a European football like star manager or coach, but like he's
That's
that,
why we got
he's that
Yiska
guy.
here.
Yeah.
Yiska's here to name that person.
I mean,
Yeah, who's like the equivalent
to what?
to like an all-star like European like coach that like created these like long-lasting legacies and like just dominated.
I mean,
the
there's
game
a
for, like,
bunch like there's Sir Alex Ferguson, I guess.
Okay.
There is, I mean, Pep Guardiola. Mourinho is a little different, but yeah, these types, you know. I will also say I don't think it's like a solo show either. I think just low key, Chris Chung is the best in the business.
Fair.
Like,
And now there's a lot of people who are like, "Who's Chris Chung?"
Yes.
We were talking about this
and
last week.
because you don't
Chris
know
Chung
him,
Chris Chung is one of the Illuminati GMs that people don't even know exist.
right? And because you don't know him, you know he's the best in the game because he understood the game, which is you never show up as a GM in public discourse, and that's playing the game at Nash equilibrium, like, you know. So, like that, Chris Chung is also part of this scouting, is also part of
Oh,
fostering these relationships to these players, right? Pre-establishing relationships with top-tier talent, selling them on the vision of the best team of all time. I mean, it's not close. There's nobody close.
Not at all. Yeah, no.
Right? And you also, because we guys know the alternatives, you also have to say the leadership is amazing. Right? Like it's like if you look at the Shock leadership, and I think actually recently Brad Lautenbach, I'm going to pronounce your name the German way, stepped away, and I think he's now with Riot. He was the former CEO of NRG, which is the parent organization of the Shock, and then also of course Andy Miller. Like these guys knew where to find or apply value. You know, who to trust. They never overpaid, but they enthusiastically, you know, supported this franchise. It's kind of like really endearing if you see like how to this day, like it's no longer like, let's be honest, like since Overwatch has gone down in popularity, it would be easy for Andy Miller to care about any of his other businesses, such as, you know, the Sacramento Kings. But like he still seems to be like really in love with this franchise and seems to be engaging with this. And this is not a given in this business, right? So this is an organization that from top down, not only did they, I mean, season 1, they kind of felt the waters. You also got to say, whatever happened in season 1 actually still set them up for season 2, right? They built the team initially. Even most of the players that they got, including Dante, then someone like Super, also Sinatra at the time, all of those worked out, right? And then they get the best coach of all time. They see an opportunity that another team is fumbling the situation, and they just sign up that guy, and they trust him to build a legacy like this. And out comes, like now 4 years later, I mean, it's a really weird cognitive situation which we find ourselves in, because I feel like we're not talking about this franchise enough, generally. Like, this is a franchise that, like, every season since season 2, they are a top 3 team, at least in their region. Yes, like, for the last 2, they haven't won a tournament. I feel like we might be overvaluing the value of tournaments in general a little bit. You got to look at their average season score and at the point system, and they're first. And I think, did they win the regular season last year in NA?
Did they?
I'm not sure.
I'm checking now.
Wait, am I stupid? Who else would have won?
Last year? It was...
They combined the results. Dallas got it.
Dallas
was 11-5. Shock was 12-4. So again, still competitive in one of their worst seasons.
Yeah, they finished outside of top 3 actually. But yeah, I mean, still, like, in a world where meta changes can make such a difference, and sometimes you just don't win it. Like, they are just consistently... Like, what's the worst you've seen Shock ever play at? It's still firmly within the top half, right? It's still firmly within the top third of the league. They never dip. They're always class. They're always, like... And for that, it's almost like... when something, like, just becomes part of the furniture of the Overwatch League. There's, the LA Valiant now is the garbage tier org at the very end. Nobody talks about when they're doing badly because it's sort of assumed. And then there's the San Francisco Shock that's always, like, playing among the top. And it's almost not worth the discourse for a lot of people. I think we serve them better in recognizing, like, what they're doing there is unreal.
Yeah, part of this is, like, there's maybe some cognitive dissonance with the LA Gladiators, because despite them winning 2 tournaments, they seem to drop the ball a lot more often in the regular season, that it's a little bit weird of an experience following them, right? I don't know if you'd agree with that, because it's like a team that's won 2 tournaments, back-to-back, 3 tournaments, if you consider last year as well.
Yeah.
Their regular season record is, like, worse than even Houston, and then Dallas and Shock. They're 11-6. Like, they're if you were to rank teams by regular season record, they would be 4th place currently. A team that is first and not first in points. A team that's first as far as tournament standings, as far as like winning 2 tournaments, is only 4th place in regular season standings. It's definitely wild. And so Shock are kind of having their stocks raised from an amazing regular season record and a finals appearance at Mid-Season Madness. But just no tournament win. But now I think, going to Summer Showdown, maybe it is their time to win a tournament. Okay, final thing about this, because we talked about Shock for way too long now, is has Crusty firmly entered Coach of the Year discussions? Has he overtaken some of the other potential favorites in that discussion for any of you?
Look, it's a definition thing. I think if you think the best coach of the best team coaches, then okay, I'm fine with you having the discussion between FaZe and Crusty. If you think it's the coach that does the most with the least, then it's Christopher. You got these 2 choices in my head, right? I don't think any other team really is in the running. Maybe you could look at Seoul, but that's already, dodgy.
Yeah, I think over the years, Yiska's definitely swayed my opinion on, like, what Coach of the Year really does, especially with, like, how amorphous coaching is in this game. It's difficult to kind of really get a finger on the pulse of, like, what a coach is doing. how or what their style is. And I think there are some big names that deserve to be on the ballot, and I think Crusty will probably always be in talks of being on the ballot. But I think my opinion's definitely been swayed over the years, and I think this season in particular, it's difficult to see it go any other way but to Christopher on London. I think like knowing a little bit more about the details from Yiska's article about the budgets, kind of the budget tier list. If you haven't seen it, go check it out on GG Recon. That really puts it into perspective for people, kind of like says the quiet out loud in terms of like what's really going on with that team. Very shoestring. And it's obvious when you look at the teams, look at the players that, you know, the team sign. You look at London, did they sign big players? Not really. Did they sign a bunch of like all-stars? Not really. But they're toppling people who have double, maybe even triple their budget. And I think like that's kind of nuts to me. So I think, at least for me as it stands right now, I'd probably still give it to Chris.
Where you at, Yiska, with that? You on the Chris train, the Christopher train?
I mean, generally, yes. If nobody asks me before this tournament concludes, which I hope nobody does, I could see like if Crusty actually wins this one, I think dude, there's something very particularly wrong for me about having GOAT discussions with people with zero personal accolades. That's true for Profit, other than the Season 1 MVP Grand Finals. Never Road Star, never Season MVP. And Crusty, never Coach of the Year, right? And that...
Well, Coach of the Year didn't exist until
Season 1
Moon won it in 2020. Because I think if it was in 2019, Crusty probably would have won it.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah,
it wasn't, so he hasn't won it yet.
Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know. Like, we'll see. It's a tight race because what both of these coaches are doing is exceptional.
Yeah.
And I will also include FaZe in that. I think you still have to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think like, okay, like top four, let's say right now, it's Chris, FaZe, Crusty. Do you say Toby? You say Soul?
Maybe.
Who's your fourth? I think that's the big question. I think the three is like very cut and dry, but in terms of like establishing a ballot, like who is your guys' fourth? That's where I think it's difficult.
I mean,
I think you could say Toby. I think you could say Soul, like that team in general.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else?
Yeah.
I'm at the sort of stage where the more the season continues and the more we see Shock improve, well, sorry, that's the wrong word. The more we see Shock continue to win and dominate the region, you're getting to the stage where, like, especially if they do end up beating Dallas in the regular season and continue their win streak, it becomes hard to not, give the nod to Crusty as we move along, and credit to Chris as well for having the season he's had. But London are not at the stage of like being at that level of competition. They're not breaking any records currently. They are performing far above expectations for where they were preseason. Granted, very, very true, very, very deserved nod. But it's like, at what level does Crusty repeatedly winning, repeatedly dominating, and I mean, unless Shock shit the bed, they are definitely coming like top 2, top 3 in the tournament for Summer Showdown, no doubt.
Yeah.
If not just being a strong, especially if they beat Dallas, they're a strong favorite to win the entire thing. At that stage, it would be you get into the stage where it's kind of getting criminal to not give it to Crusty, right? Because it's like, my guy is on a 20+ win streak now, across 2 different rosters.
You got him.
He is maybe just won a tournament, or at minimum, he's come a top 2, top 3 in 2 tournaments in a row. And he's done it across 2 different lineups, like 2 completely different lineups with, okay, Violet's returned. He's on a different fucking hero. He's kind of quote unquote off-rolling. They lost Super and they had to replace him with Kaluj Mikey, and that somehow ended up working out as well. Like, that should have been that could have been a season killer right there. That could have like really ruined their season. The situation they were in with having to replace Super last minute.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, at what level do you're gonna have like? Well, you kind of have to give it to Crusty because he hasn't even won Coach of the Year yet, and yet he's now won 2 seasons out of the last 5, on his way to competing for a potential third. And as a just once again built with the staff of Andy Miller and Chris Chung, and another insanely strong roster.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it starts to wane. I feel like Christopher's, to me, Krusty's stocks start to increase, and Christopher's maybe just stay the same, maybe just stay stagnant as the season progresses. So I lean more and more towards Crusty the longer the season goes on.
I don't hate any of the votes, to be honest. I think there's a embarrassment of riches when it comes to like really prominent figures that like deserve it. Because I think you're right. Like at some point, Crusty deserves, for his legacy's sake, just like Prophet deserves. It's crazy to me to think about how Prophet's never been a role star. Like that's nuts to me. It's crazy to me.
Underrated. He's just a really super underrated player.
In the same way, it's like, how has Crusty never been Coach of the Year? Like that's nuts to me. But it's like, it's tough. It's a really hard call, and I think you're just right. It comes down to definition, and I'm really like, there's so many good choices. It's hard to be a bad one. As long as Supreme's not on the ballot, I'm good. I'm Gucci. Shouts out to last year.
For me. Yes, for me. He gets my vote. If he's on the ballot, I'm voting for him. That's how it's going to go for me.
I like so the weaponized confidence.
Only way to stop me from voting for him is to not have him on the ballot. So that's it. That's my challenge. If he's on there, he's getting my vote.
You're getting the vote.
Is this how you get team merch? That
I'm going to get loot. Strangely, despite having a pretty good relationship with Washington, that never came across. The first team I ever got team merch from is this guy right here.
Damn.
The Atlanta Rain, let's go! Best team in the Overwatch League. Woo! I'm very easily bored. I'm extremely easily bored.
Someone started.
And other teams could have had this allegiance. Other teams could have had this allegiance, but they failed to buy it from me. They failed to purchase it. So that's on them. That's on them.
I want to see, like, from this point on, how you now start spreading Atlanta. You know, do they go up in percentage of predating Atlanta, or do you remain unbiased in your hand-signed Gator jersey?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. We will cross that bridge indeed when we get there. I don't look good in a hat. I don't know why I wanted the hat. I don't even look good in hats, but whatever. You got to complete the look. The hat's iconic. I had to get it. I'll probably never really wear it. I'll probably wear it one more time. If I go to an Overwatch event, I'll probably bring it along.
Yeah, just bring it as like a Halloween costume. Like, hey, I'm cosplaying.
All right, now that we spent forever talking about one team, we can finally just move through some actual stuff that's happening. So let's breeze through some of the changes that actually happened over the course of the last week. Start with the Vancouver stuff, because we can sort of go from Vancouver into Boston, into elsewhere. GM of Vancouver, Justin, stepped down. Justin, for those that don't know, was the GM of Vancouver, as mentioned in the title. And I have to say that because I think most people don't know that Justin was the GM. In fact, most people probably didn't know who the GM of Vancouver. Maybe they didn't even know they had a GM. I don't know. It seemed like there was already a bit of an interim GM in the middle there. I can't remember her name, but she is Baroy's lovely fiance, or are they married now? I'm not too sure.
They're married. Married. Yeah.
They're already Baroy's wife.
They're married, but I think she's more on the social media side. I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. So she was kind of interim GM for a little bit while Justin was stepping down. So Justin Hughes, and that actually this is a bit of a landmark moment for Vancouver, because now this is the full kind of Vancouver. Did I say Justice? I see the name Justin, and my mind's moving towards Justice.
Autocorrects it.
This is the full triumvirate of Vancouver Titans staff between Justin, Flubby, and Pew kind of moving on. And now you have new stuff coming out. We can basically include the Baroy stuff in here as well. I mean, we've already started talking about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But Justin leaves. Baroy exits Boston as assistant coach, now joining Vancouver as GM. And now we're discovering that Vancouver is actually a family-owned franchise because Baroy is now working in Vancouver with his lovely wife, and this is now a mom and pop team. Yeah, a mom and pop shop on the corner is the Vancouver Titans. Support local businesses, guys.
Yeah.
Right? Mom.
They're honing into like the hipster vibes of like the Pacific Northwest. They're like, listen, we have our hand-picked roasted beans, coffee, like we grind our own stuff, we raise our own players, they're farm fresh to table, like this is a mom and pop team. So Vancouver, show out, like let's support family-owned Overwatch League franchises. Okay.
Oh god, yeah. Oh, family-owned Overwatch franchises.
I mean, all things considered,
god,
I kind of wrote about this as much as well, and said as much in this article. I think this is like Vancouver finally investing into their future. I think Baroy has been around this game long enough to see the highs, the lows, what goes into actually having a successful team. And he's been in this scene long enough that I think he's more than well equipped to handle a lot of the many hats that comes with what a GM is. And then you have somebody like DePay, right? I think that the regime, if we're calling it that, is in full effect, right? That like this is the first season in a long time you can point to Vancouver Titans as not a meme team. They're not bi-week Overwatch, right? You don't just go, fuck it, it's a fucking Vancouver game, who cares? Like, no, they're genuinely a good team. Like they've proven themselves to actually be competitors, and that's a formula for success. I think what they have right now is good. I think going forward into 2023, if they can keep DePay, if Baroy has maybe even adequate or similar resources to what it sounds like Vancouver started with this year, I think we've finally got another team to kind of root for. I think we have another team that is worth a damn, and I think that only serves to promote the product and make Overwatch 2 that much of a place within esports in general, right? Like everything is good when we have good teams, competitive teams. So yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. Obviously, slightly biased. Overwatch or Baroy is a friend of mine, so excited to see him step into a new role. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. Good thing.
Friend of the podcast.
Yes,
I think he's also a good fit, just because I don't know if this is known internationally, but German grandmas have great like little health tips. Like chew on some ginger and like honey when you have a sore throat, and then you don't even need healthcare.
But do they get jerseys though? Is she gonna hand knit them like a jersey or like
in Photoshop?
Hey, that's better than nothing. I think that's like nice enough, right?
I mean, let's be honest. Like we're all going to don virtual jerseys sooner and later.
Yeah. We know metaverse, robots. Yeah, we get it.
NFTs, right? All of that.
Yeah. But Yiska's all about that stuff. Shout out, if you're into crypto and NFTs. Shiba coin, I don't know.
I am
getting Yiska's DMs.
Actually not.
Is that what we're doing?
People about to...
Can't believe you got a gator shirt.
Don't
you know about the NFTs?
I didn't even think of that.
NFTs.
That's so funny.
The closest to owning an NFT I've come is winning an $800 knife in a box in CSGO. Selling that.
Damn.
And then, like, not paying for Steam games for half a decade.
I sold a Dota 2 item.
Yeah.
This was back in, holy shit, it might have been like 2013, 2012. I sold an item in Dota 2 back in the day for 500 US, and I thought that was insane. I thought it was like, like for me back then, like 10 years ago, I was like, holy shit. Wow.
I have the complete opposite
game.
story.
I just made $500 in a free-to-play game. Let's go, baby.
Which is, I mean, that is dope. That is like a rush that like is hard to match. I have the complete opposite story where I was sick one day and I think I had a little too much cough syrup. And I bought like a $40 Deagle skin. Then I thought I was going to like get fucking nice with the Deagle. And that was not a good decision. That was a very bad decision.
Should have invested that in more cough syrup. Jesus Christ.
Maybe. Yeah, shout out to Vancouver. They're good shit. They're on the mend. They're looking good.
But yeah, look, guys, I'm here for the style look. I'm the guy that looked in the fashion brochure pamphlet. They don't do brochures. One of those like fashion magazines. And I pointed out, I'm like, I want that look, that exact look. And I pointed to a picture of Gator with the hat, and I'm like, that's the exact look I'm going for. And I have to get the shirt to go along. Anyway, we're not even talking about Atlanta yet. We're gonna get there. And yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, I mean, what do we start touching up on Titans a little bit here? And actually, yeah, okay, this is an actual Titans topic now. We'll actually turn this into a Titans topic. How do you guys feel about the team now that DP's been on board a little bit longer? We've had a little bit more time to look over the results. They are starting to win now. They actually have how many games? 1, 3?
3.
3-2. They're 3-2 this stage.
Yeah, which is crazy.
And they are probably going to make the tournament.
Yeah.
Their record is good enough that they're probably going to make the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gone from Vancouver being completely winless to now Vancouver potentially making the fucking tournament. Like, that's what is going on.
That's a crazy turnaround.
Who have they beaten? They beat Paris. They beat New York.
Gimme. Less of a gimme.
And they beat Washington, right? Is that correct?
Even less of a gimme, yeah.
Washington is a big win, yeah.
That's a sizable win, and I think people are starting to like wake up to the idea that like Justice actually aren't just like a meme team, but we'll get to them in a little bit. But like even looking at week 1 of the Summer Showdown, like game 5 against Toronto, a team that like
the sentiment that proves Vancouver's current standing, the sentiment that most proves it to me is the fact that people, and I think this is accurate, I think this is the correct take, people look at the Washington-Vancouver loss from the Washington side as like, oh yeah, but they probably weren't going to beat Vancouver, right? Because Vancouver's a pretty good team now. Like, that's the angle we take now, which I think is the accurate angle, but that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes to say that Washington losing to Vancouver is not like a humongous loss. It's not like devastating. That's like almost kind of expect. You would almost favor Vancouver. They'd say like Vancouver may be the favorites here. Like, that's a humongous position to stand in. We're going to that game, Vancouver expected to be the favorites almost. I don't know that everyone would agree with that, but that's at least my angle. That's the angle that I've seen most people.
Even if it's worth talking about, is like a change in the right direction, right? Where it's like Justice come off this like big hemorrhage of players and stars, and oh my god, you know what's going to happen with Justice? They have a fucking staff member signed as the 6th man, and they're actually pretty good. and similar with Vancouver, where it's like they've had all this turmoil, and like they're actually pretty good. Like, these are like 2 competitive teams like duking it out. Like, it's a good sign.
I mean, what's the limit on Vancouver? Do they just beat Boston now?
Yeah.
Funny enough, Baroy's instantly about to play against his old team. He's instantly about to face his old team, like, straight away.
If they don't have him as the winner interview, I really hope that like somebody gets out there and gets after him. Maybe Yiska, you need to. But like that's just like a gimme narrative where it's like Vancouver has this big stage, Baroy comes in, they beat his former team, like. What does that feel like? Like that's a gimme like rivalry in the making. Maybe not rivalry, but like it's something to hold on to. It's fresh. I like it.
There's a lot of fresh shit in that matchup, right? Like, that's also the first match. You know, I guess do you want to transition into that? There's just a free
transition
segue to the Boston talk.
So
let's finish up. Any final thoughts on Vancouver in terms of where their limit is? Like, if you had to. I don't know that we're going to do a power rankings because I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe next show.
Maybe we become a power ranking show now. I don't know. But like, what is the limit of Vancouver? Like, where would you put them right now?
Ooh.
Like, doesn't have to be an exact position, but like, what's the general area? Like,
of the teams that are going, or maybe even slated to go, wherever they sit in your mind, I feel like it's probably safe to say that Shock and Fuel are like stratified very clearly as like 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
However you want to see that. And like the next tier below, whoever you think's in there.
No.
It's probably Toronto. Toronto's number 3 for me.
Toronto's definitely in there. I think you could say Houston. Maybe you're an Atlanta biased, but like just on the records I'm looking at right now, where it's like Justice and Titans and Outlaws, it's like they're all kind of samey. And I kind of feel they're kind of samey.
I would legitimately go Houston. And now hear me out. I'm going to simp a little bit for the Glads. Fuck.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not mad at that.
Oh
I'm
my
not mad at
god! The problem is I'm about to put a 1-4 team above a lot of teams that have better records.
It's true.
Now
it's
the
true.
real one is like, do I put Glads above my new favorite team, the Atlanta Reign? You know, that's the hard one for me right now.
Mm.
And until I get a Glads jersey, I don't know. It continues to be difficult. I was actually supposed to get some Glads merch. It still hasn't came yet. So the Atlanta tournament was like boom, like that. I was like, yo, how do I get a blue hat? And then within a week, I got a blue hat. That's all it was. And I don't know. I would put Vancouver maybe as high as 7th. Honestly,
Okay.
as high as 7th.
In
I think
NA,
they are.
right?
I think in NA.
Yeah.
No, that makes
Of
sense.
the teams
to me.
going to Toronto.
Yeah, no, that is, I think, completely fair.
Yeah.
Let's be serious, guys. Leave from Chengdu Hunters is not losing to the Vancouver Titans. Okay, so definitely only in NA.
Like,
Okay.
I think it would have to be Shock, Fuel, Toronto. As I said.
Yep.
Then I would personally probably have Houston.
Ooh.
Yep. Same.
Then
It gets a little hard after that.
Then it gets harder. I also, if it's strictly power rankings, dude, Atlanta with Speedily, I don't hate that pick.
It's definitely better, but I'm still very touch and go with them personally.
I think Washington is probably still ahead of Titans, and then Titans ahead of London.
Is that a hot take though? Because Titans beat them, so is that a hot take to still have Washington ahead?
I think it's tough to not have Titans ahead of Washington. I'm open to hearing arguments, but like it's tough when you beat them in the head-to-head.
The thing, yes, I agree, but A, it was close, and B, like the rest of the schedule, strength of schedule for like where the Titans actually got their wins from is, I believe, easier than what the Justice did, if I'm not mistaken.
The Justice, I think the one standout game for me is the Justice 2-3 Shock game, which forced Shock to once again have to reverse sweep the Washington Justice.
Yes.
Like, Justice could have ended this 20-0 run right then and there on the first week.
Yes.
We wouldn't even be having this, like, you know, 20-0 run talk about Shock and maybe not even speaking that well about. I'm sure Crusty's legacy isn't damaged too hard by that, but still, you know, it's not the same level. Like, oh my god, he's at 20-0. If Justice just came out and 3-0'd the Shock or 3-1 the Shock that day,
yeah,
and even the results were close. I mean, you had 3-2 Circuit, 73 to 66 meters in Coliseo, 2-1 on Oasis. Like, Washington actually could have won that game.
Yeah.
But then again, that's like the old Washington before they offloaded their roster. Anyway, we'll get to the Washington talk soon. Yeah, we're not doing full power rankings here, guys. But I think I'd be happy with Vancouver in either 7th or 8th place personally.
You guys convinced me. I think Titans has to be above Washington just based on like post, you know, offloading of the talent and then the head-to-head. It's sad because now you think like what could have been for Justice if they had kept everyone, right?
Maybe.
We'll
Yiska had the scrim box on them of them owning in. They were doing well in scrim results, but then the roster blew up. Now we talk about Boston. And it's not just Baroy. Baroy obviously left Boston. I think he left and it got announced for Vancouver within the same day.
Yeah.
And I didn't even, but I sent out a tweet. I didn't even know that he was going to Vancouver. But when I saw the Boston's like, oh yeah, we want to thank Baroy. And then I think Vancouver even responded to that tweet and was like, good luck in wherever you're going next. I'm like, oh, here we go. And then I said it was like eyes emoji. I just sent it. And I was like, I knew. Welcome to Vancouver. I didn't know what capacity he was joining. I didn't know if he was going to be.
True.
I thought maybe he was going to be assistant coach for DP, but
yeah,
there it is. This is probably not. We should probably not attribute any sort of like weird malice in here, right? Like it's not some like internal situation where Boston don't want to work with Baroy. It seems like to me, Baroy just got a good opportunity to work on a team with his wife, where he currently lives. By the way, he's been living in Vancouver, working remotely for the Boston Uprising this entire year. Like it just makes so much sense. Also, you'd have to imagine a GM position is like a huge step up from assistant coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a major promotion.
He also
within
was
a
only
franchise, so-
working halftime as assistant coach for Boston. So
What was the other half? What do you mean?
like it was only like a half position, and I think as far as I know, maybe they upgraded him during the
Oh,
season.
right.
But I think he was working on some other, coding type of
I see.
stuff.
Something
Gumbo
stats.
stuff.
Which is why
Yeah.
this hit me also in the like out of left field. I didn't know that he would do something as foolish as become a GM in the Overwatch League. I mean, yeah.
Get some Aquilini bucks while you can.
It just makes sense, right? Like I think for those that know Baroy, like he's definitely someone that is like a very kind character, like a very unique character, but also you won't get one over on him either, right? Like it's not someone that is being taken advantage of in negotiations or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, like I always felt like if he wanted to do that, he could have probably done that. I just didn't know that this was the type of position he was going to be after, because like if you think about like someone that comes from the whole Moneyball curve, like has his own website, then does team analytics, then like slides into a more assistant coach position because the social aspect is apparently a little bit interesting, and then directly go into the general manager position is an interesting move, right? And to be fair, like you can still derive value from being so heavily into the whole metrics aspect in terms of like your job as a general manager, right? So it still makes sense from a scouting aspect, from a managerial aspect, generally speaking as well. So yeah, I don't. I'm interested.
So-
I think he has his work cut out for him, though. Like, let's be honest. Like this roster. I mean, yes, they
think
spend.
it needs a lot of work.
I mean, it needs a main tank.
I mean,
Does
for
it?
sure.
Well, maybe in the future. Right now, they're probably chilling with Mirror, but
Yeah. I think Mirror's doing a bang up job, and I think like that's another success
Mirror
story.
right now is one of the best Junker Queens in the Overwatch League. He's probably most people I talk to say it's Hawk. It's okay. First is Hanbin. Everyone agrees first is Hanbin. Then it's Hawk, and then people talk about Mirror. Some people talk about Dante. But yeah, that's basically like the consensus so far, from what I've heard.
Right.
These are Mirror is really good on Junker Queen at the moment.
yeah. But what about Punk? The Punker Queen. That's my guy.
How
we
can
might
it be,
see him.
How can a bench player be good?
Maybe he's not benched anymore. Who knows?
So, moving on to, we're supposed to be talking about Boston, guys. Keep going back
Sure.
to Vancouver. Talking about like everything else that happened on Boston. Laurie is no longer head coach. That is humongous. That's like almost the news of the week.
Yeah, it is.
It is ridiculously big news because Laurie's been with the team now for about a year and a half. And we've moved through so much stuff. I feel we've moved through a lot for the Boston organization because they also let Huck go. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I mean
now like Mineral just he's the captain of the boat. He's been so for a while now. Like
don't they have
Mineral's currently the guy.
Don't they have like a different company that now runs the team for them or something like this?
Yes,
because
that is Oxygen East or something like that.
Yes,
something Oxygen.
It also
I'm pretty sure
feels
they
like
operate by Oxygen.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like there's also like someone on Reddit continuously just speaking for the team, and I feel like that
those
guys are also like involved in it.
Oxygen Esports is just the parent company of Boston Uprising and Boston Breach. They if I'm reading it correctly, I'm pretty sure Oxygen Esports is just like the Craft Esports wing, like it's the Craft Esports parent company.
Sure.
Right? So they're not like, this isn't like Luminosity operating for Vancouver. That's a very different deal. Oxygen to me, I'm pretty certain Oxygen Esports are not some like, you know, endemic esports brand organization. Like I'm pretty sure they exist purely as, you know, again, the parent company of the Craft owned franchised esports teams, right?
Hard to say. I think we're on the right track, but it's tough. I think they're not necessarily like super endemic. They're not bigly, but like they're not like a big endemic like esports team. But like looking at like some of their socials, and they have definitely like been a thing before Boston acquired them. So I don't think it's like Boston like made. Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is then, because maybe Kraft acquired.
I think it's just
them?
a bot. Yes, I think Kraft probably is paying them to run because they are a Boston based.
No, because they say that they are owner and operator of Boston Uprising, Boston Breach. They are saying that they are owners.
Then it's possible that maybe they bought Oxygen. I don't know. I'm not like too certain on the business details of that, but yeah, I do believe that Oxygen Esports was a thing prior to the Overwatch League and whatnot.
Okay. Who knows?
Yeah.
So anyway, Laurie's gone.
Yes.
Crimzo sent out a tweet from The Simpsons that looks like he's getting out of jail.
Fired one off.
Punk's dad is probably finally happy, and you know he's got the good vibes going because he had the tweet as well. That's just like, guys, you know, this is what it looks like when Punk's in the roster, and this is your results when Punk isn't there.
Yeah.
Punk has won the Gulag again somehow. He just continues winning the Gulag.
Can I say, like, that stat was a little, you know, tinkered because Punk actually played against the pretty bad teams. You know?
Listen, we're not about nuance and context here. Right? I'm just going to appreciate the raw stat line and forget about the rest.
Yeah, I don't hate it.
Look, is Punk back? Because they got Mag.
Mag is good.
And
Mag is good.
Is it crazy? I joked about this last time. Is it crazy to consider that Boston, under Laurie's wing for a very long time, has been heavily trying to lean into a full Korean roster?
Right.
And it just seems like every time they did, it just didn't work out because Punk was better.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I think this is a team that like maybe they end up still being or ending the season very mixed. But I do see a lot of value. I see a lot of like franchise success. I think you don't, and this is like really mean to say to Punk or on behalf of Punk, but it's like Punk's probably not going to fetch like a huge price tag, right? Like you have a lot of really valuable Western pieces.
Depending on the team,
it's certainly possible. Maybe he does, right?
I could see Punk in a future season go to a team like Houston, Florida,
and he deserves
Vancouver,
it. He deserves to start and get paid.
Fucking London, I don't know. Like some of these teams are not going to pay as well. Some of teams will pay better.
Yeah.
But I think he's a staple Western player that has a place on a Western roster.
Yeah.
Totally.
And at this rate, maybe even a Korean roster, because he's apparently had to fight his way through the gulag of Korean tanks to fight against this entire way through and continually wins. But what does this mean now? Because it says Askoft is now going to be the head coach. He's now the only coach.
Yeah.
Because
Roy's out.
Baroy and Laurie are gone. They only had 3 coaches. So Askoft is now the only person there. It's Askoft and Mineral, right? It's just those 2 guys.
Yeah. I think there's another assistant GM.
There's another assistant. Yeah, there's an assistant GM there, but it's Askoft, Gerardin, Mineral, and then Robert Kraft. There you go. That's the staff members of the Boston Uprising.
Nice. Let's go. Yeah, I have to assume that people like Crimzo probably see more starting time. I have to assume people like Punk are probably like moved back into the roster. I don't hate the idea that like simplifying
finally
things
debuts.
down. I mean, to be honest, yeah, I think there's this real possibility. I don't think like these last 2 games have been like really good measures of like what this team could do with Mag. I mean, you play Fuel. I mean, come on, that's a loss. That's a loss to like every team. Like it's the Fuel. And then you play Toronto, who again, I think going back to some of our like preliminary power rankings, like Toronto's like a clear 3rd best team in the tournament right now. So it's like also not like a great sample size of like how well this fully Korean lineup could play. I felt like week 18 against the Titans was going to be that litmus test, and now it's not. No, we don't have the opportunity.
The only game they have left is Titans. That's a very important game, right? To prove
for sure
they can maybe make the Punk Crimzo version work again. And Vancouver's not messing around right now. Vancouver's like a solid mid-table team.
Yep. And I feel like Laurie leaving and this assumed roster shuffling happening going on in Boston isn't like a sign of like confidence for me.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
Well, I think the wording says they let go of Laurie, so I think Boston just they reached their limit with working with Laurie. Mm-hmm. And I respect Laurie for what he did with WGS back in Contenders Korea, but I haven't heard the greatest things about Laurie with his time in the Overwatch League. Like, he's a very strict coach. This is the word that everyone uses. He's strict. He's very strict.
Yeah.
Which is probably a nice way of saying that he's one of the regime coaches, which sometimes it works. In the case of DPA loves that shit and he gets good results, and the teams that can work with him with that, they do well.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, you have to like. I feel like Laurie came with a lot of hype into the Overwatch League just because of WGS, but then never could really convert on that reputation, right? Like, I think there was a Hux signing, if I'm not mistaken. I think he might have seen something that he previously saw maybe in a Crusty situation. Unfortunately, that never worked out. Like, the thing is, like, last season, I remember during a press conference, I even asked Valentine about the particular practice regimen they had. Because, like, from what I remember, they were just, like, scrimming one blog more than everyone else. Because they were also scrimming their academy team. Mm-hmm. And, like, that was just met with no comment, you know? And I think generally speaking, like, you can have players buy into that. And if it's, the problem is when it doesn't work out, right? Like, if you go overtime, you give it your all, but it's not efficacious, yeah, then you have a problem. You have a problem of morale, of team chemistry, of, sustainability, because I actually didn't realize until recently that the definition of burnout is not really being overworked. The definition of burnout is giving a lot and stagnating. And then as you don't no longer like experience the amount of or the rate of progression that you want, that's when burnout sets in. That's when you're and don't quote me on the, psychological aspect if that's actually burnout, but this is how, if I think about when I had burnout in my life, I think that's very true. Like, if you're working hard and it actually works out, in that moment you're not experiencing that. As soon as you get the win and then can sit with yourself and then the stress breaks over you, that's different. And I think, unfortunately, a system like this has to work, or you're going to run into problems.
It's just a wild situation because, like, Laurie came through from WGS, a roster that at the time in 2020 Season 2 Korea beat O2 Blast.
Yeah.
The O2 Blast that had Proper on it, that had both Proper and Pelican. Like, if you were to rate the teams on roster quality alone, in a head-to-head, you would every day of the week say that O2 Blast had the better team, and yet O2 Blast did not win that season. In fact, they got blown out of the season pretty handily. Like that was one of their worst seasons. And they had proper Pelican Finn and Kalios, for what it's worth. And WGS brought over most of their roster did end up going to Boston, but then my take is I don't know if Laurie can handle a mixed team. I think this guy is like good on a full Korean team, but I don't know that he is able to work with a mixed roster, and that's kind of proven by the fact that even repeatedly through his time on Boston, he's just tried to make a full Korean roster work on Boston instead. And I don't know that it does. It's just been a weird situation all around. And I think, especially when you're in a region looking across the pond, and you're looking across, the state lines, you're like, Atlanta's succeeding on a Western roster, Vancouver's now succeeding on a Western roster.
Yep.
Mayhem is succeeding on a mixed roster, but like still fairly Western. Succeeding in the sense of like them being way above expectations. New York are failing on a full Korean roster. Justice have been kind of here or there. Like they've had some good successes, but they've been failing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're looking for Boston. It's like following the steps of Rain and Mayhem, and even now Vancouver. It's like the pathway has been kind of lit for them. So I don't know what their team's going to look like moving forward. But I could see this team moving in more of a Western direction. For now, though,
For sure.
the rest of their season still has, because they're not making the tournament. I think they're eliminated from the tournament. They have Vancouver left. Yeah. And then they have Houston, Florida, Washington, like very winnable games if they show up. Like games that I wouldn't say that Boston are guaranteed to lose, but games where like you wouldn't maybe favor Boston to win, but I still think they're games within reach. They have Gladiators in there as well, but I expect Gladiators by the time that Countdown Cup rolls around to be too good for everybody to beat again.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think Boston have a fair amount of distance still to gain for the rest of the season. Sadly, there will be no more tournaments for them.
Yeah, and I think this stage in general is kind of a wash with all that's gone on the back half of it with Laurie leaving, and again, assumedly this starting lineup shuffling quite a bit again. It's tough. I struggle with this team so much because I see so much potential in it. I saw it like I feel like rightfully gave them a lot of accommodations at the start of the season with like the Zarya stuff and whatnot. Like they are a good team, but it just seems like they're too forked. Like they're trying to do too much, and I feel like either committing to a fully Korean lineup or maybe even committing to a fully Western lineup coming in 2023 is probably the correct decision. Either one I feel like is very successful. If you start your off season with Punk, Crimzo, I know a little less about Seeker, but I've heard good things. Like that's a good start. You want to go fully Korean? Okay, great. You have like a sizable and pretty solid team ahead of you. Can you get some coaches on the free market? Is there somebody like a Ty Dalla that you can kind of bring over? Is there somebody, that you can maybe bring over from contenders to like connect you with some of like the new rookies coming in? Like possibly. Like I don't hate both worlds, but like the fact that you have people like Punk and Crimzo on the bench when they probably are starters on like the majority of teams, or at least mixed rosters, is a little weird. It's kind of shitty. So they're doing it. I feel like they're doing too much. I'll put it that way.
Right on. Anything else coming from Boston? I think that was all the Boston stuff, right?
Much, yeah.
We'll have to see how their games go now. Let's go on to very briefly. NYXL signed Artist as coach.
I know next to nothing about that person. I'm not gonna lie.
I think Artist was on Talent, if I'm not mistaken. So let me just bring his stuff up.
Yes, and he was also on NYXL before.
FBX? Oh.
Starlight. He was on New York a long time ago. He was on New York a very long time ago. Then he went to Talent Esports as coach and had some reasonable results there. Talent still have never won, but it's hard to win when an O2 Blasters dominate there.
Sure.
Talent become second place to O2 twice in a row now. He worked briefly with Starlight Gaming. I say briefly, that was actually like a fairly long time. But New York have picked him up, and I think this is part of New York's rebuilding of the coach lineup, given that they no longer have a Kuki. So they have their current staff lineup looks like this. It's Nugget, Unknown. So those are the two managers with Nugget as GM. Undying Gesture, Artist. Undying and Gesture are the two assistant coaches that worked under Kuki. And then Artist coming in now who didn't, I believe the announcement just said that he was like just a coach, right? Like he's not the new head coach or anything. So as far as I'm aware, New York still don't have a new head coach, but they do have 3 coaches again.
It's a start. It's, you know, this is maybe a question for AVRL. Like, does this connect them for 2023 with like some prominent rookies coming in with talent? Like, I know, like I couldn't tell you what team he's saying plays for. I would assume it's O2 Blast, but yeah, okay, shocking, weird.
Shocking
weird,
that O2 just continue collecting all the best talent in Korea.
Weird, you know, the San Francisco Shock Academy team is like also the best team. Like, weird that this team could just like do all the good things and like make all the right decisions. Weird that strange.
Crusty for future years ahead of him, as far as we can tell, just continues to have direct access to all the best upcoming Korean talent. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about Artist because all I know is from his time is I mostly just know from his time on Talon. That's about it. Like, there's not a lot to add there. I don't know. He's not, to my knowledge, the head coach of this new team. So I don't really know what the deal is from the New York side of things. Kind of like a wait and see situation from what I can tell. Swingby is still the head coach of Talon, has been for a long time.
Do you feel like it puts them maybe in like contention for like, is Top Dragon even of age? I feel like this kid
he's going to be of age next year.
Okay. Like, is that like an interesting like through line where it's like, okay, like if you have connections there, maybe you can put in a good word. Maybe like New York has like
if New York stay full Korean and they want to, because the other thing is there was all this talk about like, oh, you know, like what if New York just go west? And I don't even want to say rumor because I don't think it's a real rumor.
No.
There's always the conversation of like, because I think New York want to be in New York, and this year has just proven how difficult it is to run a full Korean team in New York or in NA. But let's play to the multiverse pathway thread that says they're going to stay full Korean. Then yeah, going the direction of starting to get some players from Talon Esports would be pretty big. But I don't think Artist even has a full connection to the current Talent because Artist didn't work for Talon the past year. He's been with Starlight Gaming, so it's like not even really that direct of a link, you know?
That's
so
makes sense.
Oh, don't really have anything else to add there for Artist, personally. Let's talk about Kariv. That was a big one. Unless Yiska wanted to talk about Artist, but otherwise...
No.
Kariv? Kariv got let go?
Oh,
Come on, dude. No, not Kariv. He didn't even get to play. He joined, didn't really get to play. Got moved to coach. When he got moved to coach, Adam ended up getting cut because that was, you know, some budget shifting there. And now Kariv is gone. And so, what does that mean? Does that mean someone takes that budget, or is that just gone? Maybe the team felt like they didn't need a third coach. I don't know. This is all quite interesting.
I mean,
I don't know what to think about it.
He decided to step down. So, I mean, that's what the tweet says. I'm not sure what's happening.
Oh, fair enough.
I suppose, like, if you're not in an animator, then the guy that tells you how to do 2 good sleep darts a season to get a roll star, it's not of great value to you.
I mean, you watching some of the New York's games, maybe there was some advice, some feedback given because they're still doing like the double flex support look. Maybe we'll get into that, but
it was Kariv's design. They're still trying to play flex support.
Who knows? He had Gunba's ear, and he's like, "Look, you know, the space, and you know, the sleep darts and anti, da 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 da. You know, who knows? I can't imagine that. Like, it's tough to have like. I have to assume it's tough to have player coaches, especially like coming into the season. I think you're on maybe the right track when it comes to like budget, where it's like, well, maybe Mayhem are like trying to make moves, or like maybe they like have assessed a problem that they could potentially fix, and maybe they came to Kariv and were like, hey, like, what's up?
Or Kariv's just not interested in.
Could be, yeah. Could be.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Feeling anymore. He wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
No idea. Interesting. I don't really know. I wish I had more juicy. I wish I had more
Yeah.
to grasp.
This one just
grasp
came out,
straws
too.
on. This one is just like
This one's pretty fresh.
This is pretty fresh. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is hard to react to this one because part of me is like, well, I guess they don't really need a third. Do they need a third coach? I have no idea.
I don't know.
But part of me was also like, surely you don't lose too much by keeping Kariv on, or like surely he doesn't. Surely does he feel like he needs to? Does he feel like he's not getting enough, or he can do better elsewhere, or he's just done? Like he just wants to move away. Generally speaking, like he doesn't want to be in esports or in Overwatch or in the Overwatch League.
Could
I don't know.
Maybe he wants to play again. Like there's a lot of possibilities. It's hopefully wish him well. We'll find out again. Kind of the story's still developing. This dropped like a couple hours before we hit record, so it's very fresh. Doesn't like really swing the needle with how I view Mayhem.
No.
Not to his discredit or not to throw shade, but I think they'll be fine.
It's very different than letting go of a head coach, right? It's very different.
Yeah,
than,
it's different from Boston.
If it was Gumba going, they'd be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, like, oh,
that's different.
That's big.
Mm.
Yep, agreed.
So unless Yiska's got any juice to drop,
no. I don't know. Like once again, like I'm skeptical. Keep in mind, you still can sign to contenders talent. That's possible, or players that don't have an active PSA before.
Well, what are they missing for talent? Like, it's too. I think honestly, it might be too late to be like, oh, do we just need an emergency Lucio player right now? Like, is that really what they're trying to go towards?
Probably not.
I would
just
have
need a
to
mercenary. They just need a Lucio mercenary to play
quick little 30-day
stage. Yeah, like they're technically still within parameters of reaching the tournament. If what was the Albert tweet?
I don't know.
He's like, I just need to smoke a little bit more Gumba Ganja to make the tournament. I mean, Florida have what left? They have Paris and New York. I mean, they're probably winning.
Yeah.
Right? They are most likely winning those games. Although, that being said, if there is a game for Paris to finally get a win, for this new Paris roster to get a win, it might be the Mayhem game, depending on how much Gumba Ganja they want to smoke, right? I also don't think New York are pushovers either. So it's like, well, maybe they are because they got 0-3 by Vancouver. Then, to be fair, they did beat Houston. I don't know. New York's a weird team currently. It's hard to read. But like, there's a real shot Mayhem make the tournament. They go 3-3, they probably make it.
Yep, I agree.
It is possible.
Unless in the next how much time do we have left?
I mean, the
next 24 hours. In the next 24 hours, you see a main sports signing. I don't think it moves the needle for Florida.
Yeah, not at all. They end with Paris and New York, right? Like, those are very winnable. Very, very winnable.
Alrighty. And then finally, Pre from the Washington Justice has been moved to, is it an advisory role? Is that what it says?
Yeah, I feel like that was advisory.
Senior advisory role. That's one of those terms that is impossible to quantify because no one really knows what that means. Right? Like, what is senior advisory role?
No idea.
Very, very vague.
Yiska said it. All right. Yep. No. I don't know. I feel like it's like a transitionary role out of GM. Here's what I know about Pre. I'm pretty, as far as I'm aware, he is slowly moving out of Washington Justice and of the Overwatch League.
Okay.
And so this is just a scaling back, like it even says in the tweet, a scaling back of his day-to-day responsibilities while they transition away into, I don't know who's going to be a new GM. Maybe they don't even get a new GM for the rest of the year, and Priya just stays on as an advisor for the rest of the year, and then they finish it out and work on 2023 in the off season. But it's just a major scaling back of everything. It's not even just him, but it's like, the player offloading, high dollar going. Everything about the team is just scaled back, right? So hard to know what all of this is going to end up meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, there's so many endless interpretations of that. that probably all are dangerous to do. So, and unlikely to get wrong. Sorry,
Yeah.
likely to get
Right.
wrong.
Yeah. I think the one thing you can say about the Justice, not to praise discredit, is that like this has been a huge turnaround for them, right? Like somehow, even with the hemorrhaging, even with the turmoil of what's gone on with the financials, per your report, the Justice are a pretty competitive team, right? Like they're pretty damn good, and it's not just like they got lucky. Like they look like confident. Weirdly enough. When you look at esports and you look at like all the turmoil that happens with the teams, you usually see them on a downswing, whereas it feels like Justice are like probably the best they've ever looked.
I pred majorly against the Justice after the offloading because I'm like, this team should be mentally boomed.
100%.
This team should be checked out. They should be fully checked out, but they weren't. They were like competitive. And their record right now, and by the way, they've actually qualified. They're fully qualified into Toronto off of 5 games. And their record is 3-2. They're the only team to have qualified to Toronto that doesn't have a record with at least 4 wins. They only have 3 wins, and that's enough. So now they could go 3-3, and they could still qualify mathematically. And they qualified before Vancouver, who beat them. They qualified before Houston, who are also on 3-2s. But Washington Justice have a +5 map differential, which is only 1 below the Defiant. Despite the Defiant winning one more game at 4-1. So it really isn't the only game Washington. Well, actually, they lost 2 games. They lost to Shock, which is understandable. But even then, that was that was pre-offloading. That was a reverse sweep scenario for Shock as well. And then they lost to Vancouver, which is, as we've kind of mentioned now, like not the craziest thing in the world. But then they bounced back. It's not like losing to Vancouver was, like, oh yeah, classic Washington Justice.
Yeah. No.
Not very good at overrated, or in this case, like, don't believe the hype. They're still bad. But then they just beat London 3-2. So, and now who do they have left? Houston. Is it crazy to think that that's kind of winnable for Justice? Like that's actually.
I'm not gonna lie.
That's mad winnable.
I think it's a lock. Personally,
that's mad Houstonable.
I think it's a lock. I think we'll get into this, and maybe I don't know if you want to get into this now, but I think there are specific things that Houston are doing which I don't think have panned out from maybe the pre-stage scrims, and I think there are things that Washington and specifically the Dallas Fuel are doing. That kind of sets them apart when it comes to like the tempo that they set. So I think that like, so if you want to get into it, I think Houston in general seems to really lean on Ash, and I don't think that has panned out. I think it is too slow. I think you lose like the big bunny ears for the audio listeners. Coin flip meta aspect of like just hitting rails and that just being like a win condition.
Right.
Whereas I think on paper, Ash looks really beneficial with her resume, but she's just sat on by like really, really prominent like Genjis. Like she's just a Genji target that often just gets picked off. And you look at Washington and how aggressive they've been. You go back and like review some of these first fights, specifically on Control. Like Assassin is just throwing himself at these teams and like really leading the charge. Like this team feels really, really proactive, whereas a lot of teams, not to get like real in the nitty gritty. And it's funny to talk about the Justice and like being proactive because I think a lot of people remember the Shock game and like the 3-minute like volley fest on Coliseo. But like this is a different team now with Kalios, I think, leading this team in a very vocal way. I think Assassin coming in hungry to kind of like prove himself for maybe the next season. I think Justice, not only stylistically, but like with the form that they're showing, have what it takes to maybe even convincingly beat Houston. I've got that going 3-1 for Justice. Like, I don't know that Merit is going to get away with running Ash. And I feel like at this point, they keep running it enough that I think they've sunk enough scrim time in it that I'm scared of that.
Joe's kind of swaying me here. He is swaying me. Because I think Ash is mad overrated in this meta.
Yes,
I think
there's
teams
some
relying on Ash and not doing it right. That's not the
Yes.
good. That's not the hero that you want to bank on.
there's so many free team fights that you can just
That's-
win with just like a
it's-
crazy rail.
Yeah, it's pretty bullshit. It's like a gamble every time. It's
Yeah.
not literally gamble, right? But it feels.
Yeah.
It's also not random, but
No, it's not. But you know what I mean.
yeah, there's a randomness.
It feels really
It's not
shitty
random,
to just
it's
like roll the
bullshit.
dice and just
Yeah.
it's bullshit. That's a better way to put it.
It's bullshit. Like sometimes you just get bullshit. You can have the most beautiful rotation.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have rotations that avoid the enemy 100% of the time. If you're against like some cracked out like perfect like hand-eye coordination type of dude that day, you're just going to lose a player every once in a while, and that might just fuck your whole shit up. That's unfortunately like the randomness of Sojourn.
I think like there is a lot of pros to Ash on some maps, but I see it too often from Houston. I see it a little too frequently. I think it's just too slow. I don't think it's particularly great, especially into like good teams with like good Genjis and Assassin for his shallow hero pool. Like his Genji's good. His Sombra isn't, but he's not playing Sombra, so that doesn't matter, right? Like this team is going. It feels like, just from how I view these teams on paper, it feels like Washington is going to mulch through Houston.
I'm not sure.
All right. I mean, we're not going to get into Preds at the moment, but like,
I think Pelican has to be a consideration there, though, because that dude is like saying Assassin is a good Genji. Pelican was
dude, Yiska
taking.
Yiska just rolls up and is like, Pelican clears.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not wrong, but again, one team's playing Ashe, which is like a feast for Genji, and one team's playing Sojourn. Right, like there's differences. It's not just like a direct head to head, and I wouldn't even put it on the individuals necessarily all the time. I think that Justice like are showing me proactivity without ultimates, where I think a lot of teams still are struggling with like finding success and maybe even losing like the ultimate economy gracefully. Right, there's still a lot of just random beats. There's a lot of random rallies. People are still hero dragon blading. Right, like it's not great. And what I'm seeing from Justice and Fuel specifically are like really, really aggressive first fight like pushes that like sets them up for like a great snowball. And I don't see that from Houston a lot of the time.
I don't know.
Here's one really interesting tidbit about the Justice as we move forward, is that there's a very real chance now that with Justice making the tournament, that they will make the tournament, and the teams that their talent got offloaded to, Atlanta, Glads, and Boston, that's Vigilante, Happy, and Mag respectively, don't make the tournament, and the Washington Justice, the last 5 remaining players do.
Yeah.
That would be funny. There is a world, I did work it out, there is mathematically a world where both Reign and Gladiators fail to make it. In Florida, New York, London, Houston.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, that wouldn't be correct. Vancouver, Houston, London, and then one of Florida or New York make it. Most likely Florida.
Yep.
So,
Who's the problem, Ever? Who's the problem?
What do you mean? Oh, right, from the team.
You know what I mean? Like, who was the problem? Was it Boston?
Washington finally offloaded the dead weight. And they finally got rid of those ending throwing players, Happy and Vigilante and Mag. Huh? Finally. And Supreme was the truth all along, you know? They made the tournament. Because that's the funny thing that people don't acknowledge is like, people kept saying like, oh, you got to fire Supreme. But he's still on the team, and now Justice are 3-2 and they qualify for Toronto.
Yeah, so
I'm not saying they're winning the tournament. They're probably not going to win. They're obviously not going to win the tournament, but I don't know, man. Like, it just feels weird that, like, you know, what happened to all the Supreme haters? They're not talking anymore. And I'm not like, again, I don't really care whether he stays on the team or not, whether he's fired or retains. I don't really give a fuck at the end of the day. It's just entertainment. It's entertainment to see like the where the community narrative is in terms of like them all, you know, taking Washington to the fucking stake and to the pyre and trying to burn specific people. Like, yeah, we gotta light Supreme on fire. He is the witch that needs to be burned. And now Washington offloaded 3 players, 1 coach. Free's basically not a GM anymore. And somehow, you know, everyone's like sated. Everyone's, again, the blood has been sated.
Yeah.
And people, and I saw this on Reddit, people was like, oh, you know, AVRL keeps saying we're just out here witch hunting and we just want blood. It's like, are you not? Is this not like evidence? Like you're saying I'm wrong. You're saying like that's not what people in the community are doing, and yet I ain't hearing any more complaining about Supreme. Why is that? Kind of weird. I'm not saying he is at fault. Well, he's not at fault. I'm just thinking it's like a weird narrative that you know how the situation goes. It's like everyone blamed a specific person, and now that Washington are winning, and that person is still there, what does it mean? Oh god, Supreme won at the end of the day, fellas. He won.
I think with the Justice in particular, I think there's a lot of like, oh well, they just got lucky. Oh well, you know, maybe there's some like finger pointing to some of the people that they let go. If I'm gonna be completely honest with you, my honest opinion on like how the Justice have like flipped the script and actually turned this fucking boat around, it probably comes from like it's a little bit of column A through like column F, right? It's probably a lot of things happening that like have completely reset. Maybe some of the problem children have gone. Maybe some of the mindsets have shifted. Maybe there have been some hungry players on the bench that have been grinding, right? Maybe they haven't been super utilized. Maybe Decay's better on hit scan than, you know, he was on flex, or like maybe that's just a better position for him, right? I think there's a lot of moving parts to explain why Justice is now succeeding, but it's high time that we kind of look to them as, you know, a team on the mend. Granted, we'll see what happens coming into the Countdown Cup and effectively the play-ins, but as it stands right now, I think that there is a big upset potential coming in this week.
They've made 2 tournaments now, Kickoff Clash and Summer Showdown. They didn't make midseason. I think that's where a lot of like the real
it's mega
negativity of the Washington Justice came from, due to the fact they didn't make midseason, and that was pretty tragic. But like, there's no world. There's just it doesn't make any sense how they've downsized their roster, gotten rid of one of their biggest carries in Happy. Decay's even fucking role swapped, and they are now performing arguably better than they were before.
You want to know who I think doesn't get a lot of credit, and I've pointed this out a few different times, and I'm reaching here. I think he's had a great season. To be fair, I think it's. No,
I just made up a name. I don't know. What's the real answer? I just made up a name. I don't.
I think Kalios deserves a lot of credit. I think we saw what he can do for teams when he was put on New York, and they genuinely look like a playoff caliber team, but we're so fucking deep in the hole that like it didn't matter. And it's not surprising to me that when you put this kid in this team, they look different. Like, even going back to like some of like the monkey metas where like Mag was like comfortable, whatever, like they're not this proactive. They're not this aggressive. Kalios and Assassin, I feel like it's either one of them. Granted, you know, haha, it's no shit, Sherlock. But honestly, like, I have to point to Kalios as like maybe being a really, really vocal presence and like trying to get people to communicate and putting people on the same page, whereas maybe Mag was a little bit more reserved. Maybe he was trying to make the plays. Maybe Kalios is setting this team up for success, and you're kind of seeing that now. I feel like this is a great example of like teamwork meta, and having somebody to facilitate that teamwork is great, and I feel like that's probably a boon that Washington is wielding.
And now if they do beat Houston, oh my goodness,
that's a
Reddit's gonna break down. They're gonna have a mental breakdown.
maybe we were Supreme.
This whole Supreme must get fired narrative is just like in complete shambles. Again, I don't give a fuck about Supreme. My position on this is like, I just hate the witch hunting that people do.
Yes.
Where they just want to blame somebody. They have no idea what the real issues are. Zero clue what the real issue is. But they want to point a finger at somebody, and they just want somebody to die. They want somebody to get fucking burned at the stake, and that's how it works. And now that like the most interesting thing about this is like they don't even have the integrity to be like, this would still be incorrect, but I'm just saying as an example, to switch targets and be like, oh no, it wasn't Supreme, it was checks list. Ty Dollar was the person that was meant to burn, obviously. And now that Ty Dollar's been burned, the team is good. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what it is. They don't even have the integrity to do that. They what they do instead is they just cower away. They just get real quiet. Like, oh shit, we were wrong about Supreme. Whoops.
What's even funnier is if you try to read in between the lines. Now, caveat to that, I don't think it's necessarily always a good idea to always read between the lines. But like when you have somebody like AVRL coming out and saying what he said a couple episodes ago, again, you're gonna have to check it out if you want to see it. I feel like you can maybe put together why this team is, or maybe putting together a clearer picture as to why this team is being a little bit more successful. Right. Like,
I literally 2 episodes ago, I'm not, yes. Again, I fuck you didn't watch it. You get to go back. I literally 2 episodes ago dropped some literal juice on the Justice, outlining one. I actually didn't get too specific about it because I didn't want to name the people involved.
Sure.
But there was one specific internal issue that was happening within the Justice that I was aware of that did get solved recently with specific departures. And that should have some improvement on the team. And that had nothing to do with the coaching staff, nothing to do with Supreme.
Nope. So if anything, maybe made his job a little easier.
So yeah, possibly. So people will come at this and like accuse me of defending Supreme, where like the specificity of who the person is makes no difference to me. You could put anybody in that position. You could just like insert name, just take up the name Supreme and just leave it completely blank. Insert name, default player coach name. I don't care who it is. My point is, people pointed fingers. People were so vehemently like sure about they knew. Oh, it's definitely Supreme. It has to be Supreme. I bet the fucking house on it. It's Supreme. And now it's like he didn't get fired and the team's winning. It's like, well, what?
Now what? Checkmate, atheist.
What are you gonna do now? What are you gonna? Yeah, like I guess the Earth is flat after all. Fuck me. Like
you fucking globies. Come on, get your head out of your ass.
I don't know. I just find the entire act of like going after people's jobs and like making these requests to have people fired without even having any evidence or any clear understanding of like what the real issues are and what those are caused by. And she's like, no, just fire Supreme because
change it because I said so.
Because it's like, bro, you're a dumbass. I'm sorry, like you have no clue.
Oh man, all this to say, I think I speak for everybody in saying like we're happy to see the Justice do and perform well. Yes. Happy to see a team that probably should have been on the downswing come back and perform. It's good for the product as well. Like the more we also have, go ahead.
Why does no one say the talent is there anymore? They lost Happy. Does that mean all the talent was Happy? Like, well, there's no talent left, right? The talent's no longer there. How come people don't like, I don't know. Like it's
okay. Here's the math.
Yeah. Oh.
So Assassin is playing. Washington wins games. Happy is playing for Glads. Glads loses games. Therefore, Happy was the issue all along.
Yeah.
It checks out to me. Math checks out, guys.
Can't argue with that. Yeah. Strangely enough, that's more you've given more evidence there for your claim than the people trying to blame Supreme. That's the ironic part.
That's true.
There was actually more evidence behind what you just said than the Redditors saying that Supreme was at fault.
Yeah.
And again, I don't even care about. I have no allegiance to Supreme. I don't even fucking know him. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest attack vectors, if I'm gonna grab a pitchfork for a second, because I'm also not like a huge Supreme fan, but I don't get the witch hunt. But if you're gonna grab a pitchfork, I feel like one of the biggest attack vectors for Supreme is probably his scouting. Like, look at some of the rosters he built for this team in the past. Like, it's a little suspect, but like that's not something you just
scouting. You can't attack the scouting because people the entire year kept on saying the talent was fucking there. Is
for
the talent there or is it not there?
Exactly.
Because you can't say he had bad scouting if you keep saying the talent is there.
Exactly.
If you're saying he did bad scouting, then the talent is not fucking there. You can't have it both ways.
I feel like that's the only thing you can like tangibly say about this, like these teams is like, well, in the past, like he signed some really questionable people. Well, it's like, well, he didn't this year. So now what? Like, you're just like you're spitting into the wind, just like saying, like, again, to AVRL's point, it ends up feeling like a blood sacrifice. Like, you just want change for the sake of change.
People came after me. People were like, oh, the AVRL's rant about the blood sacrifice. I'm right, motherfuckers. You are all wrong because this is your behavior. Am I crazy? Like, look.
No. I think it's natural, but it's not right.
Where are all the fucking Supreme Witch Hunters at the moment? How come all of you put down your witch? Keep the energy up, fellas. He's still on the team. Aren't you supposed to be going after this guy's head until he dies? Why are you all quiet right now?
They're fair weather witch hunts.
Well, I can tell you why, because they got their blood. Because, okay, Supreme didn't get sacrificed, but a bunch of other people did, so they got their blood.
True.
So, again, you're upset that I called you out for having a blood hunt, and yet that is exactly your behavior. So, excuse me?
There was blood spilled, and they are improving, so I don't know.
There's blood spilled, and suddenly all the Supreme pitchfork has got quiet.
Yeah.
That's funny, that. It's really interesting how that works. Yeah. You were adamant. You were all so adamant that Supreme was a problem, and now none of you are saying anything.
This feels like the discourse that was around like when Walking Dead was getting into like the Negan arc, and like everybody's like, "Oh no, this person's definitely gonna die. This person's definitely gonna die," and then he just like clubs fucking Glenn on the head. Everybody's like, "Oh no, we didn't want. No, we didn't mean them. We wanted Supreme was supposed to die, not Glenn. We like Glenn. No, come on."
Yep.
They're very upset, I feel like.
All right.
I don't know how I got to a fucking
Washington ran to the week over. It's just funny. Like at this point, like it's not something that I get upset by. I think I might have been a little upset 2 weeks ago, but now it's like now it's just entertainment.
Yeah.
Now it's just entertainment that it's just like, oh shit, we were wrong. It wasn't. Oh, okay. Whoops.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it gets even better if Washington beats Houston. It gets even better if like Glads and Atlanta don't make the tournament while Justice do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hashtag offloaded deadweight.
Yeah. I mean,
it's such a weird
it's the unfortunate truth that how metas fall makes careers or breaks them. Right?
True.
So, like,
definitely extends.
If we had this meta with everyone still on this team starting like stage 1, who knows? Like how we would think about them.
I don't know. I have opinions, but that's neither here nor there. We'll probably get into that in the off season.
So let's talk about a team. I already brought this team up, and we're going to talk about their approach vectors for making the tournament, because there are 4 positions left in NA.
Yeah.
And 7 teams are still gunning for 4 positions, which means almost half of them will not make it. So out of Vancouver, Houston, London, Atlanta, Glads, Florida, New York, only 4 of them will make it. 3 of them will miss out. And one of those teams is currently sitting at 1-4. Let's talk specifically about the Gladiators. Now, there is, I believe, something like 9 approach angles for the Gladiators to still qualify, and it's been full, you know,
it's like a spider
Always
web.
Sunny in Philadelphia, kind of, you know, with the red lines and shit going around. And I believe it mostly requires that so there's 2 things that absolutely need to happen.
Okay.
One is they need to beat Atlanta either 3-0, and the other is they need to beat Atlanta 3-1. So they have to beat Atlanta by at least a 3-1 record, if not a 3-0 match. And then there's some other things in there as well, where I believe some of the other contenders, when I say contenders, I mean teams in contention to make the tournament, don't win their games. So, for example, London have to lose, right? Pretty sure London have to lose. A lot of these include Paris winning.
Oh,
which is like, that's going to be rough.
Yeah, that's a toughie.
I don't know if you can rely on that one. And then there is like some of them have New York. You need to rely on New York and Paris winning is the long and short of it, right? When you really break it down, a lot of these different pathways require that either Paris or New York win, and in some cases both win. In some cases Paris, Mayhem, and New York all have to win. For number 7, you can see number 7 on the list there. All 3 have to win, and actually number 3 as well, and actually number 2 as well.
Oh my god!
And actually number 6 as well. So 4 out of 9 of these pathways require those 3 teams to win.
Which one do you think is the most likely?
I gotta full screen this.
Surely Passage 4, right?
I
Passage
agree.
4 seems
I
pretty
agree.
likely.
Passage 4 or Passage 9.
Passage 4, Passage 8, and Passage 9
Yeah.
seem likely to me.
You say 8 as well.
Because I think
4, 8.
Toronto have a good. Toronto very likely to beat London.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But can they beat them cleanly? Because I think
Clean.
London can make that game messy
Yes.
for
They
Toronto.
could play spoiler. That's true.
Yeah.
That could get a little dicey. I think counting on New York or Paris is like a fool's errand. Even though if you were, it probably weirdly to say, I'd probably bet on New York right now, especially the way that they started.
The problem is, Joe, is that New York, Mayhem, and Paris all play each other in like a weird three-way round robin.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only teams that play against each other of those three teams are each other.
Yep.
So you say like you can't rely on these teams to win, but they're only playing against each other, so they can win.
So one of them will win.
I think they. But the thing is, that's not the crazy part. They can all beat each other, but the problem is they have to beat each other in a really roundabout way. Because you need all three of them to win one game each.
Yep.
Which means you need them to, if we were going to view this from the perspective of a round robin, you need them to tie the round robin at a 1-2 record between all three of them. Right. Which is like a very specific outcome.
Yeah.
And if any one of those three teams win 2 games instead of 1 or don't win a game at all, then that entire passage is gone, except for the Paris one, the double Paris win, number 1.
That's a tough one. It's number 1 and 5. If
I think 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7. Actually, 6 is maybe. Can Paris win double? Paris winning twice doesn't feel super consistent either. No, it has to be 4, 8, 9. I would say, by my pure own speculation, Glads have a 33% chance of making it based on this. That's actually not an accurate statistic. 33% chance in the sense that, like, out of the 9 possibilities, 3 of them seem viable to me. But even of those 3 viable possibilities, there's so many things that can go wrong. Like Glads don't 3-1 or 3-0 Atlanta, or Toronto don't beat London, or if they do, it's not by the correct scoreline. Do you know what I mean? Like,
dude, I'm not even sure if Glads wins against Atlanta.
Yeah, honestly.
And that's the other thing. They just might not beat Atlanta.
I don't know.
Currently my favorite team again.
just real fast for the audio listeners, can we read through 4, 8, 9?
Sure.
Like the most likely circumstances for the Los Angeles Gladiators to get in are.
So out of the 9 pathways for Gladiators to make it in, the 3 most likely ones are Gladiators beat Atlanta 3-1, Toronto beat London 3-0, or Gladiators beat Atlanta 3-0, and Toronto either beats London 3-0 or 3-1.
Yeah.
So if Gladiators don't beat Atlanta by a 3-0 and they let Atlanta even get 1 map, Toronto must 3-0 London. Otherwise, Glad's 3-0ing Atlanta, Toronto has to win with either a 3-0 or a 3-1.
Yep.
Yeah. Pretty brutal to maybe be in a situation where Glad's 3-0s Atlanta and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Can I say that given that this is I'm like really getting into some like conspiracy level stuff here, you know, this is like the government concealing aliens level of Area 51 Roswell stuff happening. So, you know, get your tinfoil hats on.
Yeah, shout out to
there is a world where, because Toronto talked so much shit to Gladiators about like goodbye Summer Showdown, GG, you can't make it. They smack talk them so hard.
Oh, you think they just throw?
Toronto would have a vested interest in making sure that Glads don't make it.
It is it for London to win, and then Glads can't go.
Therefore, Toronto specifically and I'm not saying they lose the match to London, but they just make sure that they only beat London by the exact scoreline that would not allow the Gladiators to make it in. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So, for example, Glads only beat Atlanta 3-1. Oh, cool, you're Toronto. Let's just lose 1 map on purpose and beat London 3-1 then.
Damn.
Because the Glads Atlanta game happens way earlier than the Toronto London game. Toronto London game's on the final day. So Toronto can absolutely plan this. I am not suggesting that Toronto will do this. But I am saying there's a level of investment and there's a level of like incentive for Toronto to make sure that Glads don't make it, because Toronto fucking shit talked Glads so hard that it would be it for them to allow Glads to make it after saying goodbye Summer Showdown to Glads and then potentially giving Glads the run back in the tournament to then get revenge on Toronto is a pretty fucking bad position for Toronto to be in. Right? That there is a world.
Even strategically, like imagine
if you clutch your tinfoil hat hard enough to your head and tape it down, that there is a world where Toronto specifically throw to make sure Glads don't make it.
I think strategically, like that isn't like a terrible idea as well. Like if for again, hypothetically, let's say the Glads come out, they've kind of identified what's going wrong. They've mentally reset. They come in and they're pounding scrims. They're out here and they're just fucking murking kids. Like it's nobody's business. They've turned this fucking shit around like crazy big, right? Toronto knowing this, that's one less team at the tournament that I need to worry about. That's actually pretty good. You give a, you sub in. I think it's possible. I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but like I don't think it's that crazy. I don't think it's that wild to think.
No, I think it's like we're literally talking about throwing for the Fran 2.0 in 2022.
No, this isn't a throwing for a meme.
I'm not saying that they're definitely going to do this.
Yes, no.
But hypothetically speaking, there is an incentive to do it, and also it would be very easy to mask. Because like, you could just I don't know, calm poorly or just like make a gamble and just do something risky. You could just for one map, for the one map you want to throw, you can just be like, hey Hisu, just play a little bit too aggressively this map. Hey,
yeah.
Just like, get a little bit too aggro here.
Fat finger your ult a couple of times.
No, because that's even obvious. Like there are more cloak and dagger ways of masking this.
Sure.
Like from my perspective, you could whisper into Hisu's ear and just say, hey, position a little bit more aggressively here. And all you see is him feeding on this fucking map.
You realize the Russian mob is literally just listening to you, like giving them tips how to play the Overwatch betting market, right? Like,
but then it's like, how do you couldn't even prove that he was inting, because the excuse is like, oh yeah, he's just getting a bit cocky. He was egoing out in the game. He was just getting a bit cocky. Like, yeah, he's just made a mistake. And because the game gets a level of intricacy where like very small bits of margin can make or break a game, a map.
Yep.
And so, like, and I'm not suggesting teams are gonna do this, because for the most part, teams want to win. And here's the problem: is if Glads actually do 3-0 Atlanta, then Toronto have to be in a very difficult space where, like, if they want to screw the Glads, they have to win by 3-2, and not 3-0 and not 3-1.
Yeah.
And if you're putting yourself in the position where you're like, okay, let's enter the place where like we purposely drop 2 maps, and then we win 2 maps, or whatever order you want to do it in, and then we get to map 5, like, you have to put yourself in a map 5 situation versus the London Spitfire. You might not win, and you could be losing both a league point in not getting in the regular season win, and also ruining your seeding a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a relative safety there, given that Toronto have already made the tournament. They can't be knocked out of contention to make their own tournament, which is a good place for Toronto to be. But they probably do want to have better seeding. So I think the most ideal situation for them is if you were clutching your tinfoil hat really hard, the best possible outcome for Toronto is that Glads beat Atlanta 3-1, and then Toronto beat London 3-1 as well. Except the one loss is generated. The one loss is on purpose, right? That would be the pathway for Toronto to, like, for the maximum efficiency of like still winning, still getting the point, and then still having the most plausible deniability to get away with it. And no one could prove you wrong. No one could investigate that and prove that you had any ill intention, because it's far too easy in this game to just be like, oh, I just had an off day. Oh, I just made a mistake. Yeah, I just got a little too aggressive. Sorry. Oh, I just kind of misused my ult here. How do you prove it? You can't prove that anyone did anything intentionally wrong. You see worse on a day-to-day basis. You see worse mistakes come through that are accidents.
Real accidents. It is crazy how many terrible beats we saw last week. But
yep. You can just Ajax. You can just whisper into who plays Lucio for this team again. You can just whisper into Choron's ear. It's like, hey, just Ajax to beat one fight. Just do it. Just like you're on 1 HP and just do it. You know, just tell him to do that.
Somebody call Yiska.
But you would never be able to prove that it was intentional.
It'd be so hard.
That's the problem. You would, because how many Ajaxes have we seen the stage? Shitloads. So many. You would never be able to prove that he intentionally fed. You would never be able to prove it. Because then you would have to. It's impossible to investigate. Yeah. Again, I'm not saying they will do it. I'm not saying they even should do it. But I am saying there is an incentive to do it. Is what I'm trying to say. I'm saying ethically they should not do it. But if they were to do it, no one could prove that they did. No one could prove it. So,
yeah.
Yiska, you got a little quiet there.
I mean, I think it's just a silly situation to think that a competitive team would ever do that unless it's Iber Power for skins.
It's silly. It's silly if there wasn't a competitive advantage. You have to understand for teams, I'm not talking about Overwatch. I'm talking about all teams and all sports.
Yeah.
Outside of esports, if there is a competitive advantage to be gained, where you basically can't get caught for it, then there's a lot of reasons not to do it, but there becomes also a lot of reasons to do it.
I think
is what I'm saying.
The problem is that in Overwatch, you don't have many elegant reasons to bring that about. Like, I think, for instance, it would totally be fine for them to just get
knocking out
players.
The Glads. Is that not an elegant reason?
I mean, you could just field
Toronto?
bench plays, but there are not that many bench plays that you could be fielding and to make it. Like,
I just said you don't need a bench. You don't need a bench. There's extremely subtle ways.
Yeah, but like
that you could go about it. That doesn't include any bench plays.
Like, get yourself into. I think that's
ethically no. Ethically, you would not. And I, from my perspective, I would ethically not ever suggest that. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that they should. Again, I have to be very clear in my language. I'm not suggesting they should do this. I'm saying objectively, as someone that has zero, I should want Glads to be in the tournament. I have friends on that team. I want them to be. I have no allegiances to Toronto. I have far more allegiances to the Gladiators than Toronto. So I wouldn't even want that to happen. What I'm saying, as someone speaking objectively, that there is an incentive for that to happen.
Yeah. To that point though, like, is there a line where like viewership or the product is hurt because Glads isn't there?
But no
like,
one
is it a bad thing?
I guess, but then it's like, well, fucking qualify, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
You could say that about any team. What if Dallas shit the bed? What if Shock shit the bed? What if any of the quote unquote favorite teams? What if Houston don't make it? Houston might not make it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They're a popular team.
True.
And that argument applies to everybody. You know, Philly might not fucking make the next tournament for APAC. Like, that applies to everybody. But then it's just like, well, play better then, you know?
Yeah. I think it's also, I guess there's also the incentive of Toronto actually wanting Glads over London in terms of fan base, but I mean, whatever.
If you are valuing your own pathway, in the tournament and like getting a good result in the tournament, the worst case scenario for Toronto is to talk a lot of shit about Glads, about them being knocked out of the tournament, and then Glads making it because Toronto helped them by beating London. And then in the actual tournament itself, Glads end up beating Toronto or somehow making their journey in the tournament more difficult. Yeah. There'd be nothing more embarrassing for Toronto. There'd be nothing worse for Toronto than for that result to happen. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So to me, my perspective is that is a crazy strong incentive for Toronto to make sure that Glads don't make the tournament.
I'm not sure how serious they take it, you know. Like, they talked some shit, like, I mean, Toronto didn't have that much opportunity to talk shit this year.
I mean, okay, forget about the shit talking part. Because that's all reputation. But forget about that. Just look at pure results.
Yeah.
We know that Glads are a team that have had a bad run this meta, but they're not awful. I don't think they're awful. I'm adamant in saying that if Glads played Houston again, I think Glads win. Right? Some of the teams that Glads played, understandably, they lost to. Did they lose to Dallas? I think. Yeah. It's like, I mean, they lost to Shock. They lost to Dallas. They lost to two of the best teams in this meta. They lost to Houston, which I think they shouldn't have. They lost to Toronto. Maybe that's a little bit more because Toronto is really just quite good. And they beat Paris. Like, the teams they won and beat are pretty understandable. I don't think Glads are that weak in this meta. I don't think they're as weak as people say they are. And I think Glads are also a team that levels up in the tournaments, as we've seen over the course of the tournaments. So I think they're a scary team. If you allow them to go to Toronto, they're a scary team.
Yeah. Also, it's kind of crazy. I thought, yeah, it doesn't feel like Toronto really like leveled up in this stage. Also, just in the regular season rankings, I think they went from 10th to 5th, just like by having a solid stage. I was like, okay, they're now like, you also don't want to gamble your season score, which I think is still true, but not as true as I initially thought. So, yeah, I also think that, I don't know. I think it won't even come to that they have to choose. I think that's probably already over.
Well, your position is that Glads might just lose to Atlanta, right? So
yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, it's a fun thought exercise. Again, I have to reiterate, this is not something I'm suggesting.
Yeah, for sure.
It's something that I am speaking on objectively, because I have to be clear that it is something on the table that there's a non-zero chance of happening, that I don't personally advocate for, but I have to speak towards because it is something that exists, right? That's a very important distinction to make.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think nobody really mistakes you. You're not glitching.
No, I think they do. I think if you read some comments, I think you'll be very, very clearly see that people indeed do mistake. So I wouldn't have to add as many disclaimers to everything I say if it wasn't for the fact that people often mistake things all the time.
Right.
Not even because they want to, it's just because of human nature. Sometimes some people hear what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And it is what it is.
Yep.
So again, plausible deniability. Just like the Toronto Defiant would have plausible deniability, I've made sure to inject plenty of that for myself as well. That's how you work a courtroom. No experience there, just speaking to the theory of it. That is all the news kind of stuff. We talked about teams, we kind of interwoven teams with the news. Do we want to maybe speak towards a little bit of the Glad's performance so far this stage, just more generally speaking, since we are on the topic of Glads? Is there something that wants to be brought in about what's going on? Is this a Reiner problem? Is this a Shu doesn't get to play? Not a good meta for Shu, not a good meta for Glad's problem? Is it a Glads and skewed? Sorry, not Glads. Funny Usher skewed and not as good on the support heroes as we thought? Is it this team doesn't have a comfortable Sojin player, but then that kind of gets shot to the wind when you have Happy coming in and nothing changes, Is it Kevster? It's probably not Kevster, but I just want to put that up there as well. So I mean, what is it? What is it about this team that has kind of been so good in the past two metas, and then this one they've kind of not been? And again, in context to the fact that two of the losses that they've had are versus the two best teams in this meta. But then you have to contextualize that and say that, well, how is it that Shock and Dallas are the two best teams here, but Glads can't compete, right?
Yeah.
I think you kind of accurately pointed at something, I think it was last week, where you talked about, supports not necessarily being like really impactful or having the same impact as maybe in other metas as they do now. I think in that same way, I'm leaning more on the compositional scale, like of looking at, compositions as like, are they more teamwork oriented or are they more individual impact oriented? And I feel like this is a very, very big team meta, and it doesn't necessarily seem that Gladiators are the tightest team. I do think that Reiner's Junker Queen definitely could use some work. And that can be a big boon for teams like Houston, obviously Dallas, but some of the teams with the better Junker Queens, definitely it is noticeable, which is surprising to me. But I don't think that's what swings the needle for Glads. I think this is a big shift in terms of where we were looking at mid-season and like how impactful people like Kevster and people like Happy could be, and like kind of taking over the game and really putting their teams up +1, where it's now you can't really do that too often. It's tough. It's really, really difficult to like consistently be able to do that, as much as we talk about like Sojourn being 50-50 and oh haha. It's hard. And I think Glads are going through the ringer a little bit. I think they ate a lot of crow. They've also had a very difficult strength of schedule, so maybe there's some some birds hanging around their neck. It's a mixture of a lot of things. I don't think it's just one thing in particular. I don't think it's just easy to go to like, oh, if we had a better Junker Queen, you'd probably win. It's like, no, I don't think like one hero is like dominating the meta. I think if there was to be one, I would agree with AVRL. It's probably maybe Genji, because that feels like the most consistent way that you can actually get up +1 outside of just Sojourn like clicking ahead. But at this point, like there's the fact that Edison can be put in a position to actually be that player for Dallas, that's kind of surprising. So it's not that easy just to go get a better hit scan. This feels very teamwork oriented.
When did Shu play hit scan for them?
Week 1.
Which game?
I think it was Dallas. I think it was just like one map on Dallas, against Dallas rather. Pretty sure.
Or was it against Houston?
I know it's week 1. I could be wrong in saying
just week 1, right?
Match.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just week 1.
Okay. Yeah. And then afterwards, they already had Happy, right?
Yes. Then you put in Happy. Then it's all fine and dandy. Like maybe there's some growing pains there, where it's like maybe Happy's having a hard time like integrating. It feels like a stretch to say, but maybe, I'm sure that doesn't help matters. I think this is a coordination thing more so than just like a player skill thing. Because going into this, like you look at the pieces needed, or that we assumed were needed to play this meta, and it's like Glads has that and even more, because they have Skewed and Funny Astro. Like if any team was going to be benefited from this meta, it should be Glads, and it's completely the opposite. So that's where I feel like it's an experience thing, it's a coordination thing, it's a teamwork thing, and it has almost nothing to do personally with individual skill. Because again, you go 3-2 versus Dallas. That's not an easy task. You go 3-2 versus Shock. Hold on, wait. Who do they actually go 3-2 against? They go 3-2 versus Houston. I'm sorry. They did not go 3-2 versus Shock. They went 3-2 versus Houston.
But they did win through 3-2 against Dallas as well. So
yes, and they're keeping it close, and that's why I'm saying like I don't think it's a mechanical thing. I think it's more intangibles. It's more flowery shit that like is really hard to pin down. But this meta, I think, leverages all that stuff, all the coordination, all the teamwork that I don't know if Gladiators has enough of a leg up on everybody else to like really convincingly blow them out.
Yeah. No, I think that's all. Like their stage looks really much like just the results look worse than the actual performances. So yeah, I like part of me just wants them there still.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's kind of like why I asked him. Like it sucks for the product to not have like the defending like stage title holders there, but also like just do better. It's like we can't just like give you a free ticket there, because that would be wrong. But it does, like if we had it our way, like you want the champions there. You want the people that like have been successful there, because it's going to draw eyes. It's going to be like more successful, and you don't want to just give them that. But it's tough to get in the way of those feelings of like, fuck, like I hope they get there, because it would make for a better event. I think we'd all agree with that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't. Has Ans played since then?
I don't know. If I'm gonna be honest, I can quickly look, but I have not.
Don't think so, right?
I don't think from the bits that I've seen, I don't believe so. Let's take a look. When did do you remember what like week he left? Or not what week he left, but like the week that Happy came in?
It must have been the week 16.
So week 16 was versus Shock. So you're saying he came in for week 16? That's when he was signed?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the 16th was the deadline, right? And we know that before that deadline it happened, and then the week after. Yeah, okay. I don't think he has played since then.
Paris. I don't believe so, yeah. I'm gonna still keep looking. But I
Interesting.
don't think so.
Interesting.
That is odd. But there again, it's like you're half happy. I've been an On's apologist, but if we're gonna put measure up some brass taxes here, happy is a bit of a more consistent quantity. Somebody who you can rely on.
What is a little concerning, and yes, it's like super fresh and everything, and maybe you can't expect as much, even like it was a couple of days since they had access to Happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you would want to win against Toronto. I think that also want to make it closer, right? Like that's a little concerning.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think none of that really speaks to too terribly. Losing against Houston, also not great, but like that's still in the league with in the week with Ants, so before the upgrade. Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to judge this team. It's crazy to think that this team might just be like top 6 and they have a 1-4 record, and it's just like a really hard stage, especially for them. I think there's something to be said about like maybe staying on Reiner too long. I understand the incentive to wanting to play all the heroes on your one main tank. It can backfire for sure. Yeah, I don't know. This is a rough one. Then again, like maybe there's also a world where them missing the tournament is actually not that bad for this team. They can really recuperate.
Yeah.
They can build up the synergy with Happy. They can warm up some of the teams in order to get scrims, then get back refreshed into the last part of the season, right? Because like if you could, we're back to sandbagging theory, but this is forced sandbagging. That's an advanced option of sandbagging, right? It's like you can't fail to sandbag if you didn't even intend to sandbag. Right? That's 3D level chess. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not too down on Glads. It is pretty interesting that the team that won two tournaments is second, therefore in standings. It's not that different from the regular season score from the Spitfire. But
Sure.
I think Spitfire is 10-7, so they lost one more match. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the Atlanta match will be a banger, and honestly, like the remaining schedule in stage 4 once again looks like they're absolutely going to farm unless the meta messes with us. Like they play Mayhem into Titans, into London, into Excelsior, into Washington, into Uprising. Doesn't get much
very
easier.
winnable. Yeah.
It doesn't get much easier.
Very doable. So I don't think it's a sell angle for Glads fans. I think there's a lot of hope to kind of hold out on. I think there's a lot of, we've seen what this team can do. And to your point around sandbagging, I think that like taking a loss here is painful, but I think you can channel that into some motivation, right? I think you can really attack the Countdown Cup with some serious frustration, let's say, right? Because this obviously is not what we assume the Gladiators can play up to. This is not up to expectation. This is not up to par. This is not up to Happy and Kevster and Shu and Skewed and like.
Yeah.
For a team this good on paper to perform this poorly is shocking.
Yeah, I agree.
So stage 4 Glads could be a serious problem, like you're saying, and less to do with sandbagging for me, more to do with just like becoming really, really motivated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no. I think I guess like what do you think while we're here? Like, do you think they got this against Atlanta?
No, if I'm going to be completely honest, I think they have it versus Atlanta, but not enough to actually qualify them. I see Glads getting better, but I also see Atlanta getting better, right? Like the addition of Speedily has shifted them. I think one of the biggest problems that I had with this team was Nero's like position within the team, his positioning in general, really. Kind of just getting picked off a lot. You go back to those first those couple of early week matches, and he's just like really disjointed. And I feel like Speedily not only is like solving that, but like this team is improving week by week. And that's the same to say with the Gladiators. But I think they're closer than Glads can really kind of argue, right? Like I have this going 3-2 for Glads, and yes, it's a win, but it's not enough to qualify.
Yeah.
I think your fate's kind of out.
I come back to join only the Atlanta discussion. So.
His ears perked up when he heard Atlanta. He's like, "Oh, blue hat crew showing up.
Blue hat crew, let's go, baby." What did you're pretting? We're pretting now. Was this an official pred?
Yeah,
we're just talking about
we just kind of moved
Just
into
very briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a dice roll to me because it really just comes down to how much faith you have in Speedily. Can Speedily be enough to carry? Because the thing is, like, as good as Speedily is, Kev's still on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah. I still think Glads are on a bit of an upswing. Yeah, I know that their last game they beat up on a new Paris Eternal roster, which is like not the most impressive win.
Yeah.
You are one of the best teams. Paris is 0-4, 0-12 in maps so far this stage. Like, cool, you beat Paris is not the most impressive thing, but I still think they're on an upswing. I still think Glads are not as bad in this meta as people say. They're not as good as Shock, Dallas, or Toronto, but I still think Glads are maybe potentially 4th or 5th, right?
No.
Whereas in the standings, they're currently 9th. What I'm trying to say is they're not 9th. To me, they're not 9th. To me, they're somewhere between 5 and 8.
Right.
Or 5 and 7. They're not 9th.
Yeah.
But they're also not top 3 in this particular meta, unless they get good enough to beat Toronto. So, but can they be good enough to beat Atlanta? It is such a toss-up, man. It is a crazy toss-up. All right, let me toss my hat in the air. And if it lands the right way up, Atlanta win. If it lands upside down, then Glads win.
Yeah.
So, all right, here we go. Wait, I have to take off my headset. All right, here we go.
Okay.
There's no way to verify this. I just have to do it, and we'll see what happens.
We'll believe you.
Okay, Atlanta win. Atlanta win.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. I'll give it 3-2. We're not doing a real pred though. But yeah, the hat decided. Look, the blue hat don't lie. Atlanta win.
Nope.
I don't hate that. I don't know. Because it could be the case that Glad still haven't been able to level up enough to catch up in time. And consider this, by the way. And a win for Atlanta doesn't have to be them literally winning, because they can still knock out the Gladiators by just not allowing Gladiators to get the right scoreline. And I don't know what all the Atlanta pathways are, but I'm pretty certain that even if they go 2-4, there's a pathway for them because they have a better record than Gladiators as it is already.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as their map record isn't bad, I think they can still get in via tiebreak on a 2-4. So yeah, I mean, there are far more ways for Atlanta to quote-unquote win here than there are for...
Looks like 60% upwards, right? For them to qualify at this point.
Yeah, so like a win for Atlanta doesn't necessarily mean you literally have to beat Gladiators. You just have to win. You just have to have a certain scoreline versus the Gladiators, and you'll make it the tournament, and they won't.
Right.
So,
yeah,
there's that.
Alrighty. We get into a little rest of the Preds.
Alrighty. Nah, fuck Preds. Let's talk about APAC and the finish up. Wait, are we doing Preds? Do we want to do Preds? Do we want to just do... we didn't talk about APAC at all.
What did you want to talk about in APAC specifically?
I'm going to leave it up to Joe, because Joe's got some questions about APAC.
You're muted.
Muted. Thank you. I want to rapid fire some questions at you because, you know, looking at Avast power rankings, looking at the standings right now, I'm seeing the Guangzhou Charge in top 4. Are they actually a top 4 team, though?
For now.
Philly's that up in the air still.
No, I think Philly is bottom 2.
Oh, really?
No, they are. The game that will determine Guangzhou's position, most importantly to me, is the Hangzhou game, because people are down on Hangzhou, but I have got Hangzhou in the same.
Okay.
I hold Hangzhou in the same regard as Gladiators in that it's been a rough start, but I don't think they're that bad. I don't think Spark are second to last in APAC. I do not believe that. I think Spark are potentially still top. Let me put it down this way: Seoul and Shanghai are above and beyond the best teams. So damn good in this
Sure,
you wouldn't believe.
Yeah.
And then Chengdu is like the next best team.
They're like the Toronto.
Chengdu is like the Toronto of APAC, right? They are the third place team. They are definitely worse than the two teams above them, but they are definitely better than everyone else below them, right? That's the Chengdu position they hold. But APAC only qualifies 4 teams. So only one more team outside of Seoul, Shanghai, Chengdu can make it. And so the question becomes, to me, is it Guangzhou or Hangzhou? It's one of the Zhou teams. Now, traditionally, you would have said easily it's Spark. Spark definitely make this one. There's no way they don't make it. But now, with Charge kind of looking pretty good, hard to say, man. Like, Charge have won 2 series so far.
Yeah,
this qualifying. That's like unprecedented. You have to remember, up until this stage, with the old Charge roster, they had only won a single match this entire year, and that was versus Valiant in opening day. Opening day of stage 1. After that, they won nothing. And now they've tripled their wins.
In a bit of a Vancouver.
In like a single week.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And they got a reasonable record. They're at a 2-2 record. Who do they play? They play Chengdu, and then they play Hangzhou. And I think they probably lose to Chengdu. But if they beat the Hangzhou Spark, they make it, because they have a 3-3 record. I think 3-3 is a good... 3-3, to me, has been the magic number that I've stated on the APAC broadcast for some time now. If you get 3-3 in APAC, you will make the tournament. 2-4 is dangerous. 2-4, I don't know if you make it. 2-4 requires you to have a tiebreaker with the other team at 2-4. So, for example, let's say that Seoul and Shanghai, cool, locked in. Chengdu, I don't know what their scoreline is. Maybe their scoreline is like a 4-2 because they lose to both Shanghai and Seoul, right? They're at a 4-2. Let's say the next team... Let's say there's a bunch of 2-4s out there. You would need number 4 and number 5, and maybe even number 6, but definitely number 4 and number 5 to be at a 2-4 tiebreaker, and then the best team out of those 2 teams in the 2-4 tiebreaker gets to make it in. That's the only case that I can see a 2-4 team making it. Otherwise, you have to get 3-3. Now, for Hangzhou, they have Fusion and Guangzhou. Now, there is a world where they actually lose to both of them, which would be fucking tragic, but there is a pretty good chance they actually beat both. If they beat both those teams, then Hangzhou Spark have a 3-3.
Right.
But if Hangzhou Spark beat Guangzhou but then lose to Philly, that puts them at a 2-4. That puts Philly at a 2-4. And then if Guangzhou also lose to Chengdu, that puts Guangzhou at a 2-4. So now you can sort of see where this 2-4 dichotomy comes from.
Yeah.
There'll be 3 teams at 2-4. So there's a lot of things that can happen in the middle of that. The middle of the pack for APAC is kind of weird. It's really interesting right now.
What's been going on with a Spark that they're like they've started so stumbly? I feel like it's sad to say, but it feels like it makes sense for Philly because they do just kind of like, as Houstonable as Houston is, it feels like Philly can always just toss a game. So what's up with Spark?
Well, the problem there was that Patty got a hand injury and Reiner's not particularly good at Junker Queen.
Sure.
But on a more serious note, Alpha Yi and Irony had to travel in from Korea during the break, and they have to quarantine as per China's, I guess, immigration laws for incoming people into the country. And for whatever reason, during that quarantine, Alpha Yi had to quarantine for longer, or he just wasn't allowed to exit his quarantine as quickly as Irony. So Irony exited quarantine, made it to the Billy house, the facility, and started playing scrims and matches with the team.
Gotcha.
Alpha Yi was still stuck in quarantine for the opening week of matches.
Jesus.
So they played Architect and Hangzhou Spark. I think they actually even won with Architect for one game. No, they didn't. They got pounded. Okay, to be fair, they played Shanghai.
They played the
Seoul.
best 2 teams.
It's not crazy. It's not out of the question. This is what I'm saying. This is the same excuse I use for Glads. Right? Hangzhou played Seoul and Shanghai, got owned. It's not out of the question.
Yeah.
Glads played Dallas in shock, lost. Not out of the question. Like those are the 2 best teams in the middle. Like what are you going to do? Then Alpha Yi comes back. They lose to Chengdu, but I think at this stage, again, we've established that Chengdu are the third best team. And again, it's the same parallel with Glads. Glads lost to Toronto. Hangzhou lost to Chengdu. Both of these teams lost to the third best team in the region in this meta. Like, it is what it is. I don't know. Like, okay, maybe they should have beaten the third best team. Maybe Spark should have beaten Chengdu. Maybe Glads should have beaten Toronto. But I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. They did not. They didn't win because they're not the third best team. But are they the fourth best team? Because Hangzhou did beat Valiant, but they're supposed to beat the Valiant. I think we don't get to see. I would say I'm not really super concerned about Spark until I see Guangzhou and Philly play them, because those are the important games.
Yeah.
I would say that in a really weird way that does not at all ease the tension for Spark fans in a very super copium way. I think Spark won and lost the games that they were supposed to win and lose in the first 4 matches, is what I'm trying to say.
You handedly lose against the 2 top teams, along with some logistics issues. You come out next week, you lose to Chengdu, whom, if we're pinning them as like the third best team in the region, that's not surprising. And then you beat Valiant, right? Like, it's hard to, maybe it's a little skewed in terms of like how difficult it is to view them, because they have played the top 3 teams in a row and lost to them in a row. But on the back half, like, you play Philly, who it doesn't sound like they're particularly good right now. And while the Charge may be on the mend, at the end of the day, it's still the Charge.
Hey, remember, the Charge did beat Philly as well. The only outlier here is, to use the Gladiators analogy, because I think it's a great analogy, is that the Gladiators had that 2-3 loss to Houston.
Yes.
That's the game I always go back to. If you remember any discussion I have about Gladiators, I always go back to, like, that just seems like such an outlier game to me, like a super, like, I don't know, that's like the Houstonable game, but it goes the opposite way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's the Houstonable game where, like, surely they don't beat the Gladiators, but then they do.
Yep.
And I'm saying, like, if they play that match against Gladiators a multiple number of times, Gladiators, to me, have an advantage there and win.
Yeah.
But the problem with that argument for Hangzhou is that Hangzhou, first of all, they have not played their Houston yet. Glads are 1 game ahead of Hangzhou. And the Glads loss to Houston was the one that they weren't supposed to lose. So when I talk about teams, okay, well, they lost to the teams they're supposed to lose to, and they beat the teams they're supposed to beat, right? Dallas, Shock, Toronto, they lose to. They beat Paris, but then they lose to Houston. The Houston game is the outlier. That's the one that they shouldn't have lost. They did lose. Now, Hangzhou hasn't played that game yet. And maybe they do play one of those games and they do lose, because they still have Charge Fusion. And strangely, Fusion are a very fusionable team in that, like, even though they look like they kind of not doing that well, they could probably still come out and win. It's not out of the equation. I don't count them out. This Fusion are not, despite me looking at them and saying, yeah, they're bottom 2, to me, they're not like a Boston, they're not like a Paris, they're not like a New York Mayhem, where I'm like, no, this team's
inconsistent.
This team's not going to happen.
Gotcha.
They're more like a London or a Reign that could flip either way. Or actually, Houston's a very good comparison as well, because Fusion drop games that are very winnable, like Houston do. That's where the Houstonable meme comes from, right? Like, Houston just lose games that they shouldn't lose, right? And Fusion happens to them as well. They literally got reverse swept by the Guangzhou Charge. Like, I mean, what is that? That's the most fusionable game I've ever seen in my life. Like that, and the Valiant game they lost to as well, which was a reverse sweep. Another very fusionable game. That's just how the squad rolls. But then they were the only team outside of they were the only team to take a map off of either Shanghai or Seoul. They took map 1 off of Shanghai, and out of the top 2 teams is the only map that's been dropped between them. The Shanghai and Seoul combined are 24-1. 24 maps won, 1 map lost between the 2 of them. It's crazy, right?
Oh, Seoul could be gunning for Shock's title. They could be up there with like a golden stage. No losses.
Yeah, I was going to say 20-0 is a bit out of the league for them, but you know.
Yeah, for
6-0,
sure.
6-0 be on
6-0 and without a dropped map, like that's a achievement.
No, Seoul versus Shanghai is going to be an epic game, because I probably curse them every time I say it's going to be epic, but sometimes it's not. Most of the times it is. I expect Seoul and Shanghai to trade maps there. There's no shot that they exit that one 3-0. It's just not going to happen. Both those teams are looking phenomenal.
True.
But yeah, that's Spark. Spark have not played their Houstonable game yet.
Gotcha.
But the thing is, my problem with that, this is where the analogy breaks down, is that Glads might be allowed to lose to Houston and still make the tournament. I don't think Hangzhou are allowed to lose. I think they have to. They basically have to win both, and if they don't win both, they have to rely on some weird tiebreaker.
Gotcha. Interesting. Anything weird coming out of Camp Chengdu? I've seen a little bit of Farah from the clips and the moments that I've seen. It seemed like
it's not good.
Yeah.
It's a worse trap hero than Ashe.
For sure.
Like, teams getting baited by the Ashe is one thing, but teams getting baited by the Farah is a whole nother level of bait.
Yeah. Has Jimmy performed well? Not to
Jimmy or Jimmy?
Jimmy. How has Jimmy looked?
He's got 2 player of the matches so far. So every time Guangzhou have won, he's been the guy. I think he's been the guy leading the charge, figuratively and literally,
right?
In terms of getting the charge the wins, he's been great. He was outperforming Carpe by quite a margin. Wow. He was carrying versus the Valiant as well. Remember, these are both map 5 wins. Charge did not win these comfortably. These were both map 5 wins.
Right.
I'd say Jimmy's the best player on the team.
Sounds like it.
My opinion.
Pain.
I mean, again, like it's hard for a Prita to come in when, you know, you have somebody dedicated to playing Sojourn and, you know, long range hit scan. So I think a Prita will have his time. I think stage 4 is when we'll see the kid come out. But it is painful. It is some pain.
Yeah.
Anything else, like any style wise things coming out of APAC that's kind of interesting that you'd like to see maybe pair off with NA or like anything
style? You think there's different styles in Junker Queen?
Maybe just the way that they're doing things. I don't know.
There's only so many different ways you can push W into the other team, Joe. Just put that out there. I would say that despite the stage looking awful for Fusion, they're not out of it. They're not mathematically out of it. And they're not like out of it. All they have to do is beat the Spark because they're gonna lose to Soul.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a gimme.
You're a Fusion fan right now. You're listening to this. Come to terms with the fact that you will not beat Soul. That's fine. Soul are on a different level currently.
Yeah.
You also come to terms with the fact that when you play Soul, it's probably a 3-0. They're probably gonna beat you 3-0. If you even take a map, that's a humongous blessing. In fact, those maps you take are more than blessings because if we get into a tiebreaker scenario, those maps count for everything. So get that map versus Soul if you can. But I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 3-0 for Soul. The important game is Hangzhou Spark. You got to beat Hangzhou Spark because if you beat Hangzhou, you can force a 2-4 tiebreaker. Because I'm pretty certain that Guangzhou will beat Chengdu. You need Hangzhou to beat Guangzhou, and then you need to beat Hangzhou. You need to beat the Spark, and Spark need to beat the Charge.
Oh, so you're saying
if the Charge,
you think Charge beats Hunters?
Oh, sorry, the other way around. You need the Charge to beat the Spark, and then you need to beat the Spark.
Right.
Because what you need is no, that doesn't work because then Charge are at 3-3. No, you need Charge to be at 2-4. So to get Charge to 2-4, they need to lose. So you need the Charge to lose to Hunters, which is pretty easy. Hopefully, and then you need the Spark to beat the Charge to put Charge at 2-4, and then that would put Hangzhou Spark at 2-3, and then you need to beat the Spark to put them at 2-4, and then through the tiebreak, the 3-way tiebreaker, you can make it in. That's Fusion's pathway. Okay, so no matter what happens, the other games don't matter, but you got to beat the Spark. It has to happen. You got to beat the Spark, and ideally with a good map differential, because again, those maps are going to count for the tiebreaker. So, Fusion fans, forget about the Soul game. Focus on the Spark game. That's the one that you have to win.
And I feel like they've had some pretty close matches, like all season long, right? Like those teams head to head have been like really like map 5, like it's going the distance. No?
Who?
The Spark and Philly. Like their head to head this whole season has been a fucking fight to get over those games.
It's been back and forth because it's not been exactly clear. I'm trying to find. Sorry.
Okay. Go back to mid-season. It's a 3-2 Philly win. Going to game 5, and then going back to a melee.
Philly, Hangzhou. Yeah, we've had 3-2, 3-1, 3-2, 3-1, 3-2, 3-1, 3-1, 3-1, 4-0.
Yeah.
You can take a guess when the 4-0 happened. Philly Spark is a very interesting rivalry. They've been very neck and neck in how close the games are. Franchise-wise, it's not that close. It's 6-3.
Sure.
But like more recent results, like if we only look at 2022, they played 5 times. Philly have won 3-2. Philly are currently the winners, and 3 out of those 5 games are 5 map games, and none of them have ever been 3-0s.
Yeah,
these 2 squads go at it very, very hard against each other.
I think it's gonna come down to the wire. I mean, it's double point for a reason. That's an accurate double point for pick'ems because that's a tough one to call. Yeah. Sunday's looking hot. You got Spark Fusion and you got Dragon Soul.
You have some of the most important games, some of the best games, and I'm not even going to be here.
No.
That is by design, though. I do have something to do this weekend. I'm going to DreamHack, so I'm not going to be here to cast some of the most insane games. Part of me doesn't want to go and just to cast the games. Part of me is like, oh, it's fine. I'm sure there'll be other games. We have another stage. We'll get there again. That Sunday for APAC is unbelievable in importance.
Yep. A lot of narratives coming to an end. Some possibilities again. Golden stage watch for Seoul. I don't think it's likely, but if I'm going through Liquipedia correctly, I think the only team that's actually done it, and I feel like they've done it twice, even though the second time is a little bit of a gimme, is San Francisco.
You say golden stage, you mean like no map losses?
Undefeated, no map losses. They did it in.
Well, not even Shot can do that right now. They can't even do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Stage.
That's why it's so like it's such a feat to be able to do that within a stage. It's so difficult to get spotless entirely throughout an entire stage. You're looking at Seoul. Shanghai's already out. I mean, 4-0 is already impressive, but 4-0, 12-0 going into week, what is this? 18. Like, I don't think it's likely, but it's something to look out for. Yeah,
Shanghai have Valiant and Seoul have Fusion and Shanghai.
Yep.
So both Shanghai and Seoul should get past their initial hurdles fine.
Yep.
And those are the undercard matches. Then you get the title bout. Oh boy, Seoul, Shanghai, and the final day is the final match. El Clasico, baby. That literally is El Clasico.
Yeah.
Yep.
Look, I'm excited. That's gonna be a good one. Probably a grand final preview. No, if we're saying these are the two.
I'm probably gonna tune in. I'm probably gonna tune in as well. I'll be at my esports bar, but like, yo, can you put on the Overwatch League for me?
Right.
Yeah.
Tune in from the bar.
Drink in hand.
Yelling at the screen. Cool. Anything further? It's been a long episode.
I think we're done. Good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yiska, final thoughts, closing thoughts.
Sick week coming up. Also, like, looking forward to who's going to qualify, for Toronto. That's going to be interesting. I think Toronto's probably a team I expect to like go big, so that's interesting as well.
Yeah.
It's a weird meta for sure, right?
Match of the week?
To do this on.
Yeah. What is match of the week?
I mean, match of the week is Seoul. Oh, sorry, in the pick'ems?
No, match of the week is in like what you think the match of the week is.
Yeah, it's Seoul Dragons. I mean, easily, right? Like,
yeah. But on the NA side, I would say Atlanta Glad. No, actually, no, it has to be Shock Dallas. Sorry, Shock Dallas and Seoul Shanghai play.
True.
Here's the other thing.
Yeah.
Shock Dallas have to tie break that 5-0. So we have 2 teams neck and neck at the top of both regions going for a tie break.
Yeah.
We're actually
what an insane weekend.
This is a thick week. I mean, to be fair, I think your first vote there with Glad's Atlanta, again, there's a lot of like stakes to that match. no matter how, it might not even matter if they win, right? Like if it goes the distance, Glad's already out at that point, right? Like there's so much riding, there's so much drama within that match. Like it's must watch.
Yeah.
Then you have, I think the Justice beat the Houston Outlaws, but I think that's a lot closer than people expect.
Yeah.
I think Toronto, London are closer than people expect, even though I think we rightly, put Toronto very high in terms of like how good, like this week's really good.
Yeah.
Like, this is some good Overwatch coming up.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's kind of nice because, I mean, it feels a little bit European football style, where like almost everyone is still in this stage very late into the stage. Does that make sense? And European football style, as in, even at the end of the season, everyone's playing for something, and this is what what this stage feels like, because like also like the way these games are scheduled is just coincidentally like dope, because like Glads can theoretically still be in a position where they can decide it for themselves in that moment, right? So I don't know. I like the narrative setup here. I think it would be an equally amazing story if Paris came through and just, helped Glads a ton.
They've done it once in the summer. Let's see if they do it again.
I think like the Mayhem and the NYXL have something to say. Like it's interesting. Like and then of course we're also blessed with the two best teams in each region facing off against each other, giving us a little taste of what I mean, it might not happen in the grand finals, to be fair, the way the bracket might shake out, but a taste of what's to come in terms of Toronto. So I'm looking forward to that.
Hopefully.
As am I. As I'm only going to be doing the one day this week, but there'll be a lot of important games for everyone to look over anyway. As I mentioned, I'll be doing some other stuff with my life this weekend, but man, insane games for sure. So catch y'all next week for the show. That's 259 signing out. Peace.